Hello, Alaska. We're here with another Meet the Candidate. Today we're sitting down with Elijah Verhagen. He is with House District 6, and this is in the Fairbanks area. I always like to start this out with introduce yourself. Tell us where House District 6 is.
Okay.
I mean, if anybody's like me, we have no clue what districts are, but we do know where we geographically live. So.
Exactly.
All
right, well, sounds great. So yeah, my name is Elijah Verhagen. I'm running for House District 6. District 6 is tied for the second biggest district in the state. It's the size of Indiana. It's massive. And so yes, part of Fairbanks is actually in District 6. Juneau Hot Springs Road, which the beginning of Juneau Hot Springs Road is kind of considered Fairbanks area. And so the district, I'm from Nenana, born and raised, and Nenana on the Parks Highway is about 45 minutes south from Fairbanks. So from Nenana down the Parks Highway, you pick up Anderson, Healy, Cantwell is one part of the district. Then in Fairbanks area, there's Juneau Hot Springs Road, and then there's a little bit of Fox area, and then there's Salsha, which is on the other east side of Fairbanks, heading towards Delta. So I have Salsha in my district and Eielson Air Force Base. Oh, I forgot to mention Clear Air Force Station, which is only 20 miles down the Parks Highway from me in Nenana. And Eielson Air Force Base continues on, picks up Salsha, bypasses Delta, they kind of carve it out there, and then you go down the Richardson Highway and pick up Gacona, Copper Valley, Kenny Lake, McCarthy, a lot of those smaller areas out there, part of Glen Allen. And then you also, starting from Delta, if you go out towards Tok, you pick up Dot Lake area, and then you pick up Tok, and also it goes all the way to the border. And then we have several villages in our district as well. So it's like they took everything that wasn't right next to Fairbanks and stuck it all in one massive district. So we have Tanana, we have Rampart, Manly, Hot Springs, Minto, and Arctic. It goes all the way up to Arctic Village, Fort Yukon. So it is just a really big district. That's been a little bit challenging trying to access all of my district, especially when a lot of the villages are on lockdown still because of COVID. However, I've been out campaigning ever since May, driving to every place that I can drive to, and I'm hoping as we get a little bit closer to the general election, I'm going to be able to start flying out or boating out to some of these villages if I'm allowed in. So I am 7 out of 9 kids. I have a big family, come from a big family. My dad was a magistrate growing up. He was stationed in Nenana, but he covered Tanana and Healy as well, which are part of District 6. So I do have a lot of people know him. He was a great magistrate, lived in District 6 basically his entire time in Alaska, which was around 35 years. I am, like I said, born and raised in Nenana, which is close enough to Fairbanks. When I was 10, my dad started a construction company, and he had 4 sons, and he wanted to keep us busy and out of trouble during the summer. So he, 4 rambunctious boys, he started teaching us how to do construction. And so when I was 10, we started our first spec home. And a spec home is a house that you build without a buyer per se, but when the market's good, you build it and then you're able to sell it. And we were. And so we started that in 2000. And ever since then, I've been doing construction. I've kind of turned that into my career. I have gotten a degree, associate's degree in construction management from UAF. And I'll talk a little bit more about my time at UAF as well in the next question. But got a construction management degree. I still use that. I'm going to talk about my time I've spent in Juneau working as a staffer, which has only been during sessions. I could only take office work for so long, and then I really enjoy working summers in hot Fairbanks interior.
So were you a part of that long special session that they had in 2019, or?
I was not. So I was fortunate enough. In 2019, and I'll talk about the dates that I was working down there, but I was not working in 2019 session. That special session I'll talk about too a little bit, is partly why I decided to run, because that's unacceptable to me to go so late when we have 90 days, max 120 days that the people want the legislature to meet, and yet that was just unprecedented how long we went.
And they proved to us all this year that they can do it under 90 days.
Exactly. It was impressive, and I'll talk about that too, and the strings that were pulled to get it done that fast. But yeah, it's so. Anyway, so yeah, I still do construction there in the summers, in the what's called the interim, which is not during session. The rest of the year, about 8 months, is called the interim. And so even though I've worked 7 legislative sessions as a staffer, I spend the interim doing construction with my brothers. We grew up, we're all still working together, haven't killed each other yet. We enjoy working together. And so we do residential construction in interior Alaska, mostly in Fairbanks, but we do a lot of work in Inanna. We do work in Denali Park. We've gone all the way out to Kantishna in the middle of the park and done some cabin remodels, etc. out there. I've flown out to some villages and done construction, and so I really do like using my hands. I built my own house out of pocket slowly, and then when I ended up dating my wife, I decided to speed up a little bit, got a construction loan, and finished my house so we could move in.
And you were sharing a kind of a personal story to me a little bit earlier that here we are, we're in Anchorage today, and we're at Russian Jack Park.
Exactly.
And fill everybody in just a little bit, just because I think it's very interesting to discover this, especially to be holding the interview here.
Exactly. So here we are at Russian Jack Park, which, being born and raised up in the Fairbanks area, I'd grown up coming down to Anchorage on and off, but hadn't spent a ton of time here. Still am getting down some of the park names. There's a lot of them, and they're gorgeous park. But this park in particular was the park that I didn't quite meet my wife, but I saw my wife here. We were at a big statewide church group get together, and so I'd seen her, and we had mutual friends, and I thought, wow, that's a really cute girl. I need to go, meet her. But she was swarmed by a lot of her friends, and I didn't quite get the guts to talk to her until the next day. But yeah, right over here is where I first saw her. The next day I went and met her, and we were at a dance, and I asked her to dance. We started, we hit it off great. I had just gotten back from working in Juneau in 2017 when I met her here. It was in May of 2017. And anyway, so yeah, this beautiful little park, when I pulled up, I was like, I've been here before. I didn't know the name of it, but I've been here before.
Well, let's get right to the nit and gritty here, and because the whole purpose behind this is to find out where you stand with the issues that you're going to be facing when you go to Juneau.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest issues that we have out there is the binding caucus, or the binding caucus rule, or for anybody that follows me long enough knows I call it the illegal binding caucus, because all regards, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And we're going to pretend for just a moment that I am the Speaker of the House. I am in charge of everything. Okay. And I'm going to hand you this very lucrative offer.
Okay.
I am going to give you front row parking spot out in front of Juneau Hall there. I am going to give you the select committees of your choice. I am going to let you introduce bills onto the floor that we will make sure get heard. But to be able to do this, I want you to sign this piece of paper that says you are going to give away your yes vote for the next 2 years on these certain bills without even having a clue what's inside of them. What would you say to me if I was to give you that offer?
I would say I appreciate the offer, but I did not come down here to go with the leadership flow and disregard the people that elected and sent me here. So District 6 is a very diverse district. We have a lot of native villages in our district. It's mostly rural, and we do not fit the mold that half of our legislature, which is representatives from Anchorage area, one size does not fit all, and especially not in my district. And there's no way I'm going to bind my hands and accept this offer from you, even though I don't mind caucusing with you in a non-binding caucus if we share close enough political views. If you're the current Speaker of the House, I'm definitely not sharing your political views. But I refuse. I will not join a binding caucus. So let's talk about a way that we could caucus together that's not a binding caucus, because it strips the power straight from the people and gives it to you, the Speaker. It gives it to the Senate President and the 4 co-chairs of Finance in the House and the Senate. And you guys are therefore calling the shots for all the 730,000 plus people in Alaska, and that's not right in my opinion. I've worked in the legislature for 7 legislative sessions. I've never been a fan of the binding caucus. Most states do not use a binding caucus.
And 52, and I'm going to throw Puerto Rico and Guam into that picture there.
Yep.
Alaska's the only place that has a binding caucus.
And so you'll be, the speaker may tell me, and others will say that are in the binding caucus, we can't do it. We can't pass a budget without a binding caucus. Well, as we just talked about, that's BS. We have, all the other states are doing it. Several states have made it illegal, like Colorado. And so that's something I signed a pledge that I will not join. And I posted that on my social media accounts, and I am not going to join a binding caucus. But again, if we share political views and we're closely aligned enough, I don't mind caucusing with conservatives, because that's what I am, but it will not be in a blind binding vote.
So I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here. You're going to caucus with me because we both agree upon this certain bill that has great meaning to the people that you represent, has great meaning to the people that I represent. But in our caucus, as we're going along and we're writing it up, the bill for its final versions to be heard on the floor and voted upon and such, the things you caucused with me on this with, half of it got stripped right back out of it. The main reasons of why you were in this particular caucus. Are you going to stick with that caucus just because you're a part of that caucus? Or are you at that point going to say, hey, the reason why I got into it, I'm walking away from this, and my vote just turned into a no from the yes that it was when we started it out?
So in this scenario, if I had said, all right, we're caucusing together because we have all these similarities, and we've seen this I've seen this time and time again working in Juneau, where a lot of really good legislators will join a binding caucus because they think, oh yeah, we do share, a lot of the same priorities, as the speaker or the leadership that formed the binding caucus, and some of them have not had the guts or thought that it was worth voting against and therefore getting kicked out of the caucus. Some have. Again, I will not join a binding caucus from the get-go, so I will not put myself in that position. But I, in 2015, was working for a representative at the time who did vote against the binding caucus, the state operating budget, because it was too big. And in 2015, the Republican-led majority in the House had the opportunity. They had, I think, 27 representatives that were in their Republican caucus.
They did.
And they could have cut a lot more back then, and they didn't. They ended up cutting, I think it was $250 million or so, when they could have cut a lot more. If they would have cut a lot more and made those harder decisions back then, we would have been in a much better financial situation than we are now. Anyways, so my boss at the time, she knew the risks. She'd lose her chairmanships and she'd lose 2 of her staff. And she asked us what we thought, and we, as her staff, said, as political fiscal conservatives, we said, do it. Vote for how your people of Eagle River would want. And she did, and so we were the collateral damage. We got laid off. I went back to construction just a month early. It was okay.
I'm going to take a lucky guess you were working for Kathy Tilton.
No, okay. I was working for Laura Reinbold when she was in the House of Representatives. She's now a senator. So
Laura Reinbold, who for 6 years in a row has stuck up her one of her fingers into the air and told yes. that binding caucus right where they could shove their agenda that they have out there. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was working for Laura at the time, and I was proud of her for that vote, because if we would have, like I said, been curving our operating budget spending back then, we would have been in a lot better fiscal area now than we are, her situation. So yeah, I am, what I'm going to do, what I have been doing, I was talking to a candidate last night that's against the binding caucus. I was on a Zoom meeting with, at one point, 98 of us that were either candidates or current legislators that are against the binding caucus. I really appreciate all the sitting legislators that are heading into charge against that. But if we stick together, because they will bully you, all you other candidates out there, and I know them all, and they will sit you down and they'll give you these offers like we just role played, and they will say, you know, we need you in this binding caucus. You're going to get all your bills heard first or whatever. It's tempting, but it's not right. And so if one of or two of us who have been adamantly against this, start chickening out, so to speak, and giving in and joining the binding caucus, it's just going to be a domino effect on the rest of us. But there are enough of us, I believe strongly, that have already spoken out against it, that come November, I think there will be enough of us they can't organize without us. They need 21 votes. And so if we all stand strong against joining a binding caucus, then I do think we have a shot at eliminating it this year.
I'm really hoping so myself. I do a prayer almost every night saying that of all the things that does happen in Juneau this year, that is the one thing that does come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Can
I talk a little bit more about that real quick? The
Sure.
binding caucus.
Go ahead.
So the binding caucus is also what has gotten us into this fiscal mess. I mean, obviously, with the COVID, played a huge impact, but still, we, under Republican and Democrat leadership, for years have overspent the CBR. Back when oil was $120 a barrel, when I first started working in Juneau, I was a house page, is what I started off, and that was in 2011. We had such high oil prices back then. We were living high on the hog, and when I was a page in 2011, first paying attention to these $15 billion budgets we were debating, I was shocked as a fiscal conservative. I was like, wow, we really need to be, replenishing the CBR, not just growing government. Growing government has never been a conservative thing to do, and that's definitely happened. And if we would have not expanded our government to the size it is now for the cumulative past 15 years, we would not be in this very tough situation that we are in now coming into this next session, where, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer that we have to make cuts. We need to bring in more revenue, but we have to make cuts. And it's not fun. I've worked on the budgets every year as a staffer, cutting programs, which then cuts people's jobs and lives. It is painful, and I really feel for the people that are affected by this. But at the same time, this would not have happened if it wasn't for the binding caucus and those 6 leaders in the past. And of course, they've switched out a little bit over the years, but those 6 elected officials pulling the shots have been overspending for years. They've drained the CBR, now they're after your PFD, and they're punishing the people for their overspending.
I did a post earlier today, and it was just nothing more than a question. How is it that here we are, Alaska, one of the richest states in the United States of America, and I've got people on there right now that are saying, no, we're not. Look at all these articles from Forbes and all these others showing how these other places are so rich. But we've got more mineral wealth sitting here in the state of Alaska than all 49 other states, or let's say all 51 other states, not counting ours. We outdo them all when it comes to the resources and the wealth that we have sitting here in this state.
We do.
But we are $50 billion in the hole.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say I'm exaggerating here, but when you owe $20 billion to the Peers and Tiers account, our constitutional budget reserve, the CBR, is mandated in their statutes that they have to pay that money back, and they've blown $14 billion over the last few years. I mean, when I go back to the beginning of Parnell's ending year. There was $24 billion sitting in the CBR. They transferred $5 billion over to the Peers and Tiers account to shore that up, and that brought it down to, at that point, it was about $9 billion in the hole. They haven't put a dime in since then.
Yep.
So now we're at the 20 billion mark in the hole for that. If we've got the largest aging workforce in Alaska, that people just don't realize that if all of these people were to retire today and cash out,
would be in big trouble.
There's no money to cash them out on their retirement accounts that they have been putting into all of these years and our matching funds that we do.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing that how I don't want to say people are ignorant, because I see it as a failure of our legislators. They never talk about the retirement accounts.
Exactly. I'm glad you bring this up, because exactly they never talk about this. We talk about down in the legislature. They'd rather talk about the size of the PFD as their political bargaining chip. They'll talk about all the budget deficit annually, but they rarely talk, except for that year when Parnell paid it down by $5 billion. I was working there as a staffer, and I think that was a wise decision. But you're right. We have not paid a dime. Or they have not paid a dime since towards PERS and TERS, and that is a liability that we owe. And so it's kind of.
And here we are. They're saying, "Oh well, we can't cover this. The Department of Health and Services. We can't cover K through 12. We can't cover this." But the money always seems to show up for those things, and which we'll go into more detail on that later. But the retirement accounts, on the other hand, when I first started reporting on this, it was at $10 billion. Here we are 5 years later, and we're now at $20 billion. And there's no hope in sight. And they're saying, well, we can't cut the budget anymore. But where are they supposed to get the money to pay for that?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of sitting legislators right now, and a lot of candidates that I've been in forums with, etc., and most of them on the liberal side, they think the solution is always just taxing the people, and tax. To if they even talk about these, PERS and TERS, most of them, some of them I don't think even have a clue. The candidates, city legislators
don't even know what the words, the acronyms for them are.
Exactly, so. And so a lot of them, of course, are pushing a statewide income tax, a statewide sales tax, a statewide, everything tax, to tax the people mostly. When there's not even that many of us, only a little over 730,000,
and only 350 of us that is. Have jobs
that are working.
Or I should say, used to have jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, I mean, this is something that I'm glad you brought up because it needs more attention. I have been campaigning, like I said, since May, and people all over my district, when I talk with them about these things, they primarily my district's very conservative, so I'd say about 80% of them are in favor of cutting the operating budget, cutting the budget. But there are some, and there are many candidates right now that say, don't you dare try to cut the operating budget. We can't cut the operating budget. We need to spend more.
Giesel, Coghill, Kopp.
Yeah, people
just to
that
throw out a few names
exactly.
There.
Yeah, and
David
that's
Wilson,
not
just my own personal pet peeve there.
Yeah, and that is not practical. When we owe $20 billion to PERS and TERS, let alone the deficit that will be facing us come January. We have to be cutting the operating budget. So a lot of some of those that you've mentioned, they'll say, well, we've cut state spending. Well, that's true. They've cut the budgets. They've cut the capital budget. They've gutted the capital budget. They've gutted the people's PFD. And there was a time where they cut the operating budget by a couple $100 million. And
you mean the operating budget that's at $4.9 billion right now that they advertised when they ended the session this year. But as Schauer has pointed out, is going to be $5.5 billion by January of this coming up year.
Exactly. And so that is going back up. And so the past 2 years, this last session when I was working in Juneau, I was looking at the numbers in the departments that I was a staffer over, and in the past 2 years, the legislature had been creeping up spending again in almost every department by 15%. That is anything but sustainable. This past legislative session, we lost $7 billion because of the stock market crash in March alone. It took all of the previous year to gain $7 billion, which was really, we were doing well in our high interest, earnings on the PFD corpus and the main four accounts. But we lost that $7 billion in March alone because of the stock market crash.
But wait a minute, have we really lost it though? I've looked at where our permanent fund dividend stands at.
Yeah.
I've looked at where our
it's going back up, which is phenomenal.
We're almost right back to where we were before the pandemic hit.
Exactly.
And shut that all down. So in reality, our permanent fund dividend or the ERA account, the reserves account, that is where they hide all that money, so to speak. really hasn't dropped at all. We're still sitting at the same $65 billion, $66 billion that they started out with.
Yeah.
Their most recent numbers they want to tote is pandemic numbers, which is $61 billion, which is where you're getting your, this is where we've lost it.
Yeah.
But if you go back in and look at where that money actually is at, we're right back where we were. So to say that our permanent fund dividend can't pay us a full statutory PFD, I have a real problem with this. And
exactly. Yeah, so
to say, and I'm going to throw one more in there to compare the ERA, saying, well, we had $17 billion in it, and now we only got $12 billion in it. They want you to ignore that $5 billion they just transferred into the corpus that increased that $40 billion that was there to $45 billion.
Yeah.
So we haven't really lost any money at all. We're right on track to where it should be to begin with, other than I was predicting $70 billion by the end of this year, but that was pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So I mean, thank heaven the economy nationwide has been picking back up. I think on July 2nd, the POMV draw, they pulled out for this year's budget just over $3 billion, and then we already have gained, and the earnings reserve POMV draw dumped into our earnings reserve account from the corpus another $3 billion, and so which is phenomenal. No other states. So I am optimistic. I mean, we do have, like we said, $20 billion in PERS and TERS of liabilities. We have these multi-billion-dollar deficits coming up facing us. But compared to, for like you're saying, for legislators to say, oh, all these other states are doing better than us, no other states have this corpus PFD account, the earnings reserve account. We cumulatively still do have $65 billion in there. No other states have that. And so we still are. I'm optimistic. It's going to be hard. We're going to have to tighten our belts severely, but we still owe it to the people to pay them a full PFD, their money, unless...
How about all the money that they've stolen from us from the past years?
Yeah, so that, when Governor Walker single-handedly decided to veto half the PFD in 2016, and now I hear some of the former conservatives saying that publicly, I've heard several of them say, I think the PFD should be on the amount should be on the table every year up for debate by us. And I am very against that. We've had a formula, 5-year average formula that has been working well for the entire life of the...
well over 3 decades.
Exactly. I'm 30. Since before I was born, it's been working well. And so for them to say that we don't owe the people the money, it's not their money, first of all, is, in my opinion, a lie. There's a fallacy.
It is. I mean, name me one other state that you don't own the minerals underneath the ground that you own.
Exactly. So other states, oil in Texas, Texas is the number 1 in the nation for oil wealth right now. We're like number 8 right now, unfortunately, for Alaska. And Texas, the Dakotas, New Mexico, all of those areas, the owners of the land, the people own the mineral rights, and therefore they get dividends from the oil companies.
They are raking it in.
Exactly. And we don't get that because we've cumulatively, given up our oil rights to have the PFD. And so for you to tell me, some people, that it's not the people's money when we gave up our mineral rights is wrong. It is the people's money. 25% of it talks about in our Constitution shall go into the permanent fund. And so, it is the people's money. And I'm not, we do need to be careful with the amount.
It's not like government doesn't get their own share of that money. We split those royalties right down the center between the people of Alaska and their share.
Yep.
And when you were mentioning the $3 billion that they pull out, they gave us $500 million of our share. But there's $3 billion there. And that's not the total cumulative amount that was actually put into that ERA for the year. Our fair share, if they were done it right, would have been $1.5 billion of that $3 billion. So they took their share, which is $1.5 billion.
They took their share first, and they gave us the scraps.
And then they took a 5% POMV draw on top of that. And then they took our share of the permanent fund dividend and slid that right on over. So when for the audience that may not be understanding right at this point, that $3 billion you were describing was literally $1.5 billion of that is our money.
Exactly.
That they never should have touched, and they took $1 billion of that 1.5 billion and gave themselves all a pay raise. Is the easiest way to describe it.
Yeah. So with last year's budget, the POMV draw, which what that is a percent of market value, and so that is the interest, a percent of the interest that the PFD main account has generated, and so what has always happened until they started getting their fingers in it is that that earnings dumps right from the main corpus account into the earnings reserve account, and that is where our PFDs are paid. And so for all these years,
and all
that
the
money
from the
royalties
oil, from fishing, from oil, from timber, you name the mineral resource, all that. There's always a portion of money that's always getting added into that ERA on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. So they took last year out of the $3.1 billion that dumped into the earnings reserve account, and therefore it's up for the legislature to spend in their eyes. What we've always done before is first we paid a full PFD out of that this year, $3.1 billion, and whatever was left we've been using to close fiscal gaps, etc. Well, they, in the past 2 years now, have decided we are going to fully fund the operating budget the way we want it, growing it, and then with whatever's left, we'll pay in the form of the PFD. Whatever scraps are left. And so that has accumulated.
You kind of give me a good segue into one of their bills that they had on the Senate floor this past year. It was Senate Bill 104, and this was to cap the budget. We all want to cap the budget. I mean, that's a very good positive spin that they give to that word. They want to put it into the Constitution so that they can't spend X amount. But they want to stick our permanent fund dividend underneath that cap.
Exactly. Yep.
As we were mentioning just a little bit ago, they came out with their $4.9 billion budget, which currently is sitting at $5.2 billion. We know there's going to be another supplemental budget that's going to be added in January, like they do every year, because they never fund enough for medical, Department of Health and Social Services. So we're expecting anywhere between $100 to another $300 million supplemental just to cover that extra there.
Good for mentioning that, because so many people don't even understand what that means, and that supplemental is what the legislature and the what they deem that the departments and the people, not necessarily the people, but the departments, the government needed extra on top of the budget that they previously passed.
Because it was underfunded.
So they have been stuffing a lot in the supplement. That's been quite the battle this last legislative session too. So they'll say, we have a $4-point-something billion budget. Well, when you also include the supplementals, then it tips up to almost 4.5 or what, So that is something I'm glad you brought up, because so many people don't even understand about the supplemental. And so they'll stuff that with all sorts of stuff. But
So continuing on with the capping there.
Yep.
The cap they want to set was $6 billion. We just got done describing spending $5.5 billion. That means there's only $500 million left to pay us a permanent fund dividend with. If they put it underneath the cap like they said. If they followed the traditional formula, our PFD would be a transfer from the earnings reserve account that has absolutely nothing to do with the budget.
Exactly.
And we get our dividend paid out from that.
Exactly.
But now they want to say that tax revenue is where our PFD is getting paid from. 2019, they changed the laws, or they changed the way they structured things, and for the first time ever used tax money to pay a portion of our permanent fund dividend. They used that as leverage this year to say, if you don't vote for the CBR vote, which they got to have 3/4 of the legislators vote for it to be able to tap into that money, Alaskans are only going to see a $500 PFD instead of $1,000.
Yeah.
Because they put the money that they were going to use from their CBR to pay the other half of that permanent fund dividend. But how can we be using tax money to pay for a formula that comes from a totally separate account that has nothing to do with tax money?
Well, the answer is we definitely should not be. And so, exactly. So he brought up some great points here that I want to mention. The main two reasons I decided to run for office this session is this is the last, this is definitely not an ideal time to be running for office. It's going to be a very hard job ahead of me and anyone who's running for state house. You get blamed for everything you do or don't do, but yet the main two reasons that sparked me running, and he mentioned one just a second ago. Number one, when my current representative, Dave Tallarico, who I've worked for in the past as a staffer, he pulled me in his office in January when I was working this last session for Representative Sharon Jackson, and Dave pulled me in his office and said, "Hey, heads up, I'm not running for office. If you're interested." And so that was in January. I started seriously pondering, praying about it with my wife, and because I knew, I have a son who's 16 months. I just finished building my house. I wanted to enjoy this summer, be out canoeing, camping, but I took about 2 months, both of us, pondering, praying, weighing the pros and cons of if I should do this. And I felt at the end that I have not only been prepared and I'm experienced and ready to do this compared to any of my opponents that I'm running against right now, but it was duty calls and it was the right thing for me to step up and do. And I did not want whoever took this seat, Dave's seat, because Dave was strong standing against the current majority that's in there. I did not want whoever takes this seat to go to and join a binding caucus, to join the current Democrat-led with a few Republican majority down there, the rhinos. I was not about to let this seat go to someone who may do that. And so I was like, well, the only person I fully know won't do that is myself, so I better jump in and do this. The second reason is, having worked 7 legislative sessions down there as a staffer for 4 different Republicans, working on budgets every year, I'd never seen the kind of blackmail I'd seen this last legislative session with what he's talking about. Blackmail, coercion, to where the minority Republicans in the House got nothing. There was no compromise. The majorities in the Senate and the House got everything they wanted. They've been kumbaya with each other, the leadership. And second to last night of this session, before we adjourned, they were up in the finance room doing the committee,
the final committee.
Committee when they don't agree.
House Bill 205.
Yeah, so
state and capital budget. Where
they're doing the joint committee where the
Senate version, the House
version
bills are combined.
I can't believe I'm drawing a blank of what it's called, but anyways, they're the conference committee. So they're doing the budget conference committee, and Senator Shower and many others in the Senate fought really hard to give the people, when they needed financial relief the most, they tried really hard.
Stimulus.
They tried really hard to give them the rest of their 29 PFD, or that failed, and so then they went for $1,000 stimulus. They got it by, I think, with 1 or 2 votes.
Yeah.
And then in this committee,
and I'll never forget Senator Natasha von Imhoff going totally, oh my God,
I think I voted for the wrong thing.
Yes, and immediately calling for another
reconsideration to change your vote. Yeah. And so luckily it still passed by 1 vote after Natasha, rescinded her vote and switched. But in that final committee on committees, I was watching there, a lot of late nights. It was late, and I was watching that, and I was just disgusted when I saw them outnumber, of course, the 2 minority people on the committee voting for the stimulus, $1,000. They stripped it right out, and then they knew we aren't going to have enough to fund our operating budget. So, because we don't have 3/4 of a vote and we want to fund it with the CBR, the Constitutional Budget Reserve, how can we do this? Let's split the already peewee $1,000 PFD, which should have been just around over $3,000. Let's cut that in half and fund only half of it, unless we can squeeze some votes out of the minority. And only if then will we pay the COVID relief money and the other half of your PFD. That's what they did to blackmail them at the very end, and I was just
the one
disgusted.
That they use every single year, the PFD, but you missed the reverse sweep.
Yep, exactly.
The reverse sweep is always a blackmail item they use to gain those extra few votes that they need to steal the money out of the CBR.
Yep.
I was one of those people that night when they started their thing at the Senate started their vote on the final House bill for 205, and I'm sitting there in front of the TV when it came time for that CBR portion of the vote, going, vote no, vote no, vote no. Because that was their one leverage to get people back to the negotiating table to do the one thing that us Alaskans are now paying the repercussions for. Get that stimulus put back in.
Yeah.
I mean, return the money they stolen.
Yeah, and so what he means with the reverse sweep is, not only did the Senate and House majority get everything they wanted, the minority got blackmailed, and of course, if they would have voted no, the news would have said, mainstream news would have said, oh, the Republicans don't want you to have the other half of your PFD, which, if anything, they were fighting so hard for you, and I'm a witness of that.
And all you poor people in the rural area, forget about your cost equalization payments that you're going to get for your fuel to run your generators.
Yep,
and
that was in there too.
All you medical students, forget about your student loans that you get. These darn Republicans that voted no don't care about you.
And really all it would have done if they would have not gotten the 3/4 vote is they would have had to spend an extra week or two and actually compromise, and instead they got everything they wanted. They also got what he mentioned, the reverse sweep, which is giving back all of the most of the vetoes that Governor Dunleavy had fought so hard for.
Yes.
So they got everything they wanted. The people got nothing really.
And we got the shaft.
Yeah, and so at that point, those were those main two things that motivated me to run. Is I, do not want whoever takes this seat to ever join those majorities, because they are not representing the people. When the people were emailing by the hundreds, and they'd link all the legislators on their email, constituents, Democrats, Republicans, they were all emailing the same thing. Please, mandates have shut us down. We need some sort of financial aid. And this was, I calculated it up once, hundreds of emails. 90% of the people were saying, please, we need something. Only 10%, mostly state workers, oh, we don't need a PFD, we don't need financial relief. 90% of the people needed that relief, and they were completely ignored by the majority of the legislators. And so when there's that blatant disrespect for the people, that's something I never want to see, and that's partially what motivated me to jump in.
I'm going to throw out some dirt here right at the moment. Are you running as a Republican?
So that is something that makes me unique in my race. I'm actually running as a conservative, undeclared candidate. And so I thought long and hard about this.
So are you saying you're an independent then, or?
So I'll explain this. Yeah. So I did not want to be labeled. As you can tell, I'm anything but a liberal, and I've been a lifelong registered Republican my entire adult life. So right when I was 18, I was eager. I joined the party. Have been a registered Republican. I was our district's bonus vote right until I decided to switch to undeclared to run. And the reason I chose undeclared instead of an independent is because independent in Alaska has kind of gotten the label now of a Democrat.
Well,
Bill Walker.
More than just a label. I mean, the Supreme Court of Alaska declared the Independent Party is the Democrat Party.
Exactly.
And their platform is fundable, supportable, campaignable.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the last thing I wanted to do, is be labeled as a rhino or a Democrat, because I'm not. And so undeclareds, you have to get a small percentage of your district's signatures, resident signatures, to get on the general election ballot. I did that months ago. I didn't have a problem doing that. I have a lot of name recognition. I've worked in Juneau for years. I've been in the Republican Party leadership for years. I've been our district's vice chair for years. My dad was the chair for years. I'd gone to all but one state Republican convention. I'd gone to nationals in 2016 to the Cleveland convention for our state. I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of name.
Exciting,
and we could talk about that too. But my brother is the current mayor of Nenana, Josh Verhagen. He, in 2 years in his term so far, has been able to balance the budget. Nenana is really on the uptick, and he's just done a phenomenal conservative job there. But undeclareds, when you go and vote on Tuesday, undeclareds can ask and receive a Republican primary ballot and vote. Independents can't. They're given a Democrat ballot.
I have
nonpartisan.
Been undeclared my entire life.
Yep.
And that's because I do not sit on the party lines.
Yep.
I don't sit in the Democrat corner. I don't sit in the Republican corner.
Yep.
No matter how many people want to call me a far right media type personality out there, I am far from it.
Yeah.
I've been accused of being a libertarian, and I've been accused of being an independent. I'm undeclared.
Yeah.
I'm undeclared for a reason, because the parties to me have lost all meaning.
Yep.
And where they truly stand anymore.
Exactly. So after really thinking this thing through. I just did not feel right about running as a Republican anymore because of the continual hypocrisy that I was seeing in my own party at the time. So, and I won't name names, but I know everyone in the Republican Party. I've been there, like I said, 12 years. I've worked on our state rules committee. We couldn't even change our rules to censor all of these fake Republicans that were joining the Democrats for power. We tried in our Republican statewide meetings. We tried to even censor them, and we were completely shut down. You know, they're better than a Democrat. Well, when they join the Democrats and they do everything the Democrats do, are they better? You know, and so that was on one side. And then the hypocrisy to also stand up and say in our meetings how Democrats are the enemy and should be treated that way. I was just like, oh, okay, what the double standard is going on here, you know? Like, they're the enemy, they're horrible. Oh, but here's all these people joining them for power, and we're not going to do anything. And so when parties, and they're both, you know, both parties are messed up, when parties aren't able to hold their candidates accountable and elected officials accountable to their platform, because I truly believe and helped even, you know, change and improve some of the Republican Party platform when I've, you know, been working in state conventions. When we can't even hold our elected officials accountable, then what good is a party at that point? So I feel like I am more conservative than the party right now. Big government is never a conservative thing, and look at the Senate Republicans that are growing government and that are taking the people's PFD. And so from the get-go, I announced that if after the election, I will caucus in a non-binding caucus with the real Republicans in the House, because I'm anything but a liberal, and I will fight for conservative principles because that's who I am. But I decided that I was going to do this as an undeclared candidate and go right to the general. And my district, District 6, is so conservative that in a general election, which we're in again, I was looking closely at the numbers, and in 2016, when Trump was up for election the first time, which I believe he'll get more votes this time.
I'm going to throw it right back out there again. You threw a red flag word out there for me.
Yeah.
You said caucus.
Yeah, I said a non-binding caucus, though.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. When you say caucus, I'm going to caucus with the Conservative Party.
Yeah. Yep.
I myself, I'm offended by that because I don't want to have any sort of a caucus. Mm-hmm. We went into the detail earlier about the differences of a binding and a caucus and a caucus.
Yep.
So I mean,
I can explain.
I would prefer, you know, if I was to be in your area to vote for you, I would prefer to hear to say that you are 100% willing to work and stand with other conservative that are out there that are working for the same agenda. But the minute you put the word caucus out there, I watch my hackles go up on the back of my neck, and my red flag goes up in the air saying, all right, I just heard something I don't want to hear.
So in our state constitution, we are required to get together and choose a Speaker of the House. And so it doesn't, I guess, necessarily need to be called a non-binding caucus, per se, but we do need enough conservative-minded people to, you know, if a liberal wants to vote for a conservative speaker, that's fine too, obviously. But we do need at least 21 conservatives to elect a Speaker of the House, or else we'll be stuck, kind of like, you know, when Gary Knopp wouldn't make up his mind. We were a stalemate for over a month of wasted state dollars because we had no permanent speaker. So we couldn't organize committees, blah, 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 get, you know, stuff, get the work done. So we do need to elect a speaker, and so like I said, I am totally anti a binding caucus, but I personally don't see a problem with getting together with like-minded individuals to elect a speaker. And so, you know, if there's a better word than caucus, I don't mind using it. But hopefully that answered your question.
You did just clarify there that in a language that I would prefer to hear, and I'm sure the constituents out there would prefer to hear. Because anytime I hear the word caucus anymore,
it's bad.
I'm going, no, we can't do this, and we got to make sure that does not happen. Even though the word caucus and it being in a caucus is not a bad thing. But when you're in a binding caucus and you sell out your constituents' votes and voices 2 years in advance without knowing what's in a bill,
it is just, there's nothing worse. And I've been campaigning, like I said, for months, and there is not one person. There's not one person who's defended the binding caucus except for a lobbyist privately messaged me, how dare you attack the binding caucus, and other staff that are under the legislators currently in the binding caucus and the binding caucus legislators. So minus those few people that of course are benefiting from it, not one person that I have told about the binding caucus that, oh, that's a good idea. No, it's everyone's, first of all, most people are shocked. They hadn't heard of it.
They never even
yeah,
knew it was
and so, yeah. But, so anyways, back to, we were talking about right before I'd said the word caucus. Oh, yeah. So in Juneau, bills, and this has also really gotten to me, bills, say there's a great bill, it gets read across, by the speaker across the floor, unless it's from the majority, it rarely gets a hearing. If it does get a hearing, you have to beg for it. So right now that this last session, and the past couple sessions I've been working down there, I've been working for the minority Republicans because I'm not going to be working for the fake Republicans. And so I actually, as a staffer, kind of my expertise and what I enjoy doing is carrying bills. I've carried several through the whole process. But what happens is if a bill is not from the majority, it barely gets a hearing. If you beg and plead, you go to the chair of the majority.
Might make it to one.
And if it gets a hearing, it's usually just because they're trying to be nice to your boss or whatever. Or what's worse is they'll use it as a political bargaining chip. They're like, oh, this is actually a pretty good idea from the minority. We'll latch on to this and we'll do a quid pro quo, so to speak. And again, I won't name any names, but one of my bills that passed the whole process was used in that way for a while, to where it took a whole nother session to get it passed because the majority, some of the majority members latched onto it because it was a great, made common sense bill of Rep. Tallarico's, and they were trying to do a bargaining. Well, I really enjoyed working for Tallarico. He was not about that. They stalled his bill, and what we did is we turned up the heat on them. We sent, all of our supporters to call their office and to get that bill moving, and eventually it did, without having to make any kind of agreement. So bills, unfortunately, in Juneau, for all the time I've been down there, it's not about, ooh, is this a good bill? It's about who did that bill come from, and that is not right. Our borough assemblies or city
Bills
assemblies.
Are not supposed to be politics. It's supposed to be all what's best for Alaska.
Exactly. And so right now that the Democrats are in charge of the House, any conservative bills get this high scrutiny, and basically if they get a hearing, they get one hearing, or they get latched onto and used as a bargaining chip. I'm not about that. I know I'm just one person, but things will never change if we don't change. And so when I was a staffer down there, there was... back when I was working and the Republicans were in charge, because they, unfortunately, some of the leadership would do the same thing when they were in charge. A good bill would come from a Democrat, wasn't even heard. When I was a staffer years ago, there was a good bill that came through my committee. I screened it well, and I brought it up to my boss, and I said, hey, this came from the other side, but I actually think this is going to help Alaska as a whole. It was an agricultural bill that really helped. And I said, let's pass it. And my boss, okay, sure, let's do it. And so we passed it on, passed our committee. And that's something that, again, I'm about as conservative as it gets, but I believe that every bill deserves a chance. Just like, in borough and city assemblies. My brother, he's the mayor right now of Nenana. I go to a lot of his city councils. Nenana is very much not Republican, Democrat. It's what is best for our town. And so we'll see an issue come up before the city council. We have conservatives on the city council and we have liberals on the city council. And typically, if it's a heated bill, then they'll split. And the conservatives vote together, the liberals won't, or will vote against it. But usually we're able to find common ground, and if the bill is actually good for the community, everyone gets behind it. And so that, there's an entire legislature.
You're describing right now the Mat-Su Valley, why the Mat-Su Valley is geographically so different in its makeup compared to our sister city in Anchorage when it comes to voting and how our boroughs are run and stuff like that. There is a lot of bipartisan. I mean, one of the borough members had said the other day, if I was to do what they are doing in Juneau right now, I would be thrown in jail up on charges if I was to run politics and bills and things that are getting through. Yeah. For doing it the way they have it done in Juneau. They forget that they're there for the people. You're our servant.
Yeah. And so many people forget that, and it's just so frustrating. Again, the blatant disrespect I'd seen for the majority of the constituents this last legislative session was beyond what I'd ever seen, working down there. But yeah, there's an entire legislature in Nebraska. State of Nebraska is the only one in our 50 states right now, but it is completely nonpartisan. So they are able to take issues and on their merit. And of course they have conservatives that get together and they have liberals get together, but it's not about parties there. And so I know we're a long way off from that, but we in our district, District 6, the majority of my constituents are, over 6,300 of them, are registered undeclared. We all typically vote conservative because we're conservative, but so many people, being out on the campaign trail, I've gotten more and more support, a lot of donations, getting my signs up all over the place. I'm doing some fundraisers coming up here soon, and events. But more and more people are tired of the games of the two parties. And again, Alaskans in general are more conservative, which is great. Conservative principles work better, but they're really tired of the drama and they're appalled by the binding caucus. And both parties have used that.
Gets pushed, even though we are a conservative state.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really appalling.
Yeah.
Let's get more into what you're going to end up facing when you end up going to Juneau. You've got early learning and K through 12.
Yep.
Big, huge portion of our budget.
Yep.
We got $1.25 billion is what got spent back in 2018.
Yep.
It's now $1.3 billion here in 2020. That's a $60 million increase on a budget that they keep claiming has been cut. That we've reduced that budget. We haven't increased it, we've reduced it. But when you look at the numbers, that's $60 million more.
Yeah.
We got the pandemic that's hit, the virus. It's threw our entire school system into the 21st century and forced them to take a serious look and start using virtual classrooms.
Yeah.
Per student, average is about $15,000, 15 to 18, depends on whose numbers you want to look at.
Yeah.
But virtual classrooms only cost $5,000 per student on average.
Yeah.
If we were to go virtual classrooms throughout the entire state, we'd be looking at about a $650 million budget to run our K through 12 school system versus the $1.3 billion budget that they currently have out there right now.
Yeah.
I've got a proposal that I've been throwing at everybody out there is why don't we just go virtual classrooms, 80%. Take 80% of our school system and go virtual with it. The other 20% of our brick and mortar schools, we leave them as our brick and mortar schools. These are for those that need to be able to have a place to go get extra tutoring. For those that have special needs, that the only way they're ever going to be able to keep up with their education is to be inside of a brick and mortar school. And we could also turn these same 20% that are left over into technical training schools so that they can get hands-on real life skills that they can go right out of high school and go get that $60, $70, $80, $100,000
instead of racking up student debt and then not having a job when you graduate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But and I was crunching the numbers, and I promise everybody out there I will be publishing an article that's coming out tomorrow. I've been working on this for a little while.
Awesome.
And it has more to do with the Prop 1, our Fair Share Act, than actual K through 12 education. But it's a part of the write-up for it.
Yeah.
And so we got Prop 1, and I'm going to add that right into it right now. They're saying that if you vote yes for Proposition 1, that get our fair share, as they call it, of the oil revenue coming in. And I'm just going to throw ConocoPhillips out there. $9 billion they brought in last year. $9 billion, and Alaska wants their fair share of that $9 billion. Well, Alaskans don't want to realize they had $8 billion in operational costs and expenditures and everything else that was left out there, and they were left with $1 billion. That does not include what they still had to pay our federal government for their fair share of what they're supposed to get.
Yeah.
So thanks to President Trump, they only had to pay 20% of that, so $200 million went to the federal government.
Yep.
That left them $800 million to give their shareholders, reinvest back into Alaska again for any of their new projects like Anwar or Willow or or any of that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out where Prop 1 comes up with. We're going to get $1.5 billion out of there. But and the reason why I bring up Prop 1 is because unless they're planning on giving the oil companies absolutely nothing, we're still $1.5 billion over budget from what we bring in revenue.
Yeah.
They want to think that miraculously they're going to squeeze water out of a turnip and be able to get that to be used into the budget from them to cover that, which is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Making false claims that we'll get back our full PFDs if they do this.
Yeah.
The numbers are still not lining up. And here we are, K through 12 education, early learning, and there's an opportunity to cut $400 to $650 million a year off of that budget.
Yeah.
By doing nothing more than stepping into the 21st century.
Yeah.
So if you get there, and just to make my long speech go into the question here, are you going to be playing politics as usual? Or, I mean, we've got some hard cuts that need to be made. The special interest, and I hate calling our education system special interest, but when you're 48th in the nation for providing an education, and if you throw Guam and Puerto Rico into that mix, we're actually 50th in the nation for providing an education, the worst education in the nation, and we are 49th for how much we spend to provide that.
Yep. And it's been that way for a while.
Garbage education that we get.
Yeah. So great. 2 questions there, and I'll take them both. First off, the Fair Share Act, just its name is silly, in my opinion. We are already, the oil companies in Alaska are already paying their fair share. So I was on an Alaska Oil and Gas Zoom meeting that they were giving us an update. They had a an independent study of our tax regime here, comparative to globally. We currently are just above average with our tax regime globally, as under our current SB 21. We defeated them trying to go back to ACES years ago. SB 21 has produced way more money into our in taxes to our state than ACES ever did, and that the Fair Share Act will do. And so we in 2019 brought in over $3 billion. And you might think, okay, well, how much, what percentage is that? That was my first question on the Zoom, meeting that's a lot, but what percentage, if we brought in $3 billion, and it was the state and local governments that brought in $3 billion. Because if it goes through, a borough or wherever, they'll take their share as well. It equates to 57% of the oil companies. So I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to work if I only get to bring home 43% of my income, and so like you were talking about, they have their other costs and their, and their investments and shareholders and all that.
Like you mentioned earlier today, and myself, if you lived in Texas, that person that owns that land is not giving 57% of their royalties.
Oh, not at all.
over to the state,
Nope.
and over to the other individuals, or those that are doing the actual exploration and development and extraction of those minerals from their land.
Exactly. Yeah. So if the Fair Share Act, as written, were to pass, it would jump us up from, or the oil companies up from 57% to 96%. So, of course, what would they do? What would any person who has any sense in business do? They would close up their doors. They would wait until the tax regime changed, because they know they have $24 billion of discovered deposits up there right now waiting to be developed, but they're kind of waiting on us and watching our, almost every legislative session I'm down there, I swear, the liberals are trying to change the tax structure again and again and again.
So to put this into terms that an average person like me would understand, because if it wasn't for my deep understanding and your deep understanding, this wouldn't make much sense.
Yeah.
But I go to work I work for McDonald's.
You get 4%, Jacob.
I go there, I put in my 8-hour days, I work 5 days a week because I'm a go-getter and I like overtime. I'm going to put in 60-hour weeks instead of my normal 40 so that I can get that little extra bump every single week. And when it's all done and told, I only get to see 4% of that money that I went out and all the hours that I worked as a return.
Exactly. You'd opt to go on unemployment because you get way more, you know.
I would. I could get, instead of that $400 paycheck that I got for working an entire month, here's your $3,000 to be sitting on welfare and unemployment.
Yeah. So yeah, the Fair Share Act, if you're watching, please vote no on that. I will do my best to keep our oil companies in check. They do well in Alaska. Hilcorp is doing fantastic. I'm thrilled, and anyone should be thrilled because really that is what's been paying for our schools. If you really look into it, you know, I would love to diversify more, but until we do, let's not demonize and kill the golden goose. And so Hilcorp is doing their best to revitalize a under BP declining field. That's really good news for Alaska.
They specialize
in that.
And taking old fields and bringing them back to where they're almost like a brand new field all over again.
Exactly. So that is really good for our state as a whole as far as bringing in revenue. But yeah, the Fair Share Act is just ridiculous, ill-conceived, and so I will do my best as a legislator. I would love to, and of course this all plays out after the election, and we'll see. Of course, since I'm not joining the binding caucus, we'll see if I can get on the resources committee. But I've followed that a lot as a staffer, and I'd love to get back on the resources committee. There's so many mines and resources right in District 6 that I'd love to do that. But it's always kind of fascinated me. But yeah, we have $24 billion of known, oil deposits up there that we still could develop, and that long term is going to keep us continually away from having to have an income tax slapped on us, or all these taxes on punishing the people. Corporations are not people. We
got to quit looking at what's next year going to look like. We need to start looking at what's 5 years from now,
and be doing that. And I think Dunleavy's done a great job.
20 years from now.
Yeah, I think Dunleavy's done a great job at looking to the future and not just, oh my gosh, panic, like a lot of people would have us do.
You mean like our current legislators are doing in Juneau. They're panicking, oh my God, $1.5 billion shortfall this year. Yep. I was sitting in a candidate forum, live streaming it here. This was about a month ago. And Senator Shower stood up in the room because he's not running this year. And he stood up in the room and he goes, I got an announcement to make, everybody. We are $1.5 billion shortfall this year with the revenue that we have coming in from being able to pay the current budget that we currently have out there this year. If we were to do nothing more than pre-forward the exact same budget again for this next year, this is how much we're short from covering it. And this is, mind you, not taking our permanent fund dividend yet. This is pre-dividend.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm going, okay. And then I kind of got to thinking about it, and I went back. I did a little bit of research. What was last year's $1.5 billion shortfall? What was the year before? $1.5 billion shortfall. What was the year before that? Another $1.5 billion shortfall. Yeah. So even during this pandemic, this virus crisis, they're still short the exact same amount. It's not like they didn't receive any less revenue than they would have before. The only people that are feeling the real crunch is us Alaskans that are getting the shaft saying, I can't get a job because the place isn't open anymore. And especially those in tourism. I mean, that's a whole nother subject. But so exactly. As far as your education question, great idea. I have a sister who's a teacher right now in Fairbanks. I have a lot of teacher friends. Teachers have, signed my petition months ago to run, and I really feel for them right now. They trying to move completely to virtual teaching is a learning curve. Doesn't mean they're not willing to do it, and I commend them. And so we definitely, I support our education system. In District 6, my district is so rural. I really like your idea. I think that long term,
I would love to be able to see those that would like to send, or especially can't send their kids to, can't keep their kids at home very easily because of babysitting. You know, life's expensive these days. Most families, both spouses have to work.
I'm going to throw one in there that I didn't add
Sure.
in. We've got Head Start.
Yep.
Early learning.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't our 20% of the schools that we have out there become more like Head Start and provide that early education for those children until they reach the age of 9 or 10, when our state laws kick in and say that they can stay home without having to have a babysitter?
Yeah, yeah. So, your idea I really like, and most of the schools in my district right now are starting off virtual. A lot of them are looking to, in the next month, move into in-person. But even in-person, like my little sister teaching in a Fairbanks school, an elementary school, there's, you know, a lot of elementary schools there. Her elementary school had 500 students in it last year. Right now, there's about 280 that are sending their kids back physically to school, because it makes sense. If you can, why send your kid to school right now when, as soon as there's a COVID case, you may, boom, it's gonna mess your schedule all up again, your work schedule. So many have chosen to homeschool, and many have chosen to do online school from the get-go. Almost half, 280 out of 500.
I'm one of those here in the valley that's already done that. In fact, my kid came to me at the beginning of it and said, before they were even talking about whether or not you're going to be in the school, Dad, can I go ahead and enroll online? I don't want to go back to school anymore. I would prefer to do it online. So I had her do all the research, and my followers out there have all heard this speech before. But she went out and she did the research. She came back to me and says, Dad, here's what online schooling does. Here's what the brick and mortar school does. Online schooling has a 90% above average scholastic rate. They're performing 30% better across the board than our brick and mortar schools are doing here in the valley right now. And they got a 98% graduation rate. And she compared the top running schools in our state and compared to them to the online course that she took. She got enrolled. I'm blessed. I've got a kid that is very much self-motivated, everything else. I didn't have to do nothing but just kick back and let her go. She enrolled herself, got herself all into the school. School hasn't even started yet. She's already completed now, since my last interview that I brought this up, she was at 3 full credits already been passed.
Wow,
she now has she now has 5 full credits underneath her belt. She's completed 5 classes.
Wow, that's awesome. So, yeah, I think that your ideas are awesome and would work in a lot of areas. My district is very unique again because it's so rural. I was out campaigning in Eagle, Alaska, which, if you remember then, has no cell reception, very limited internet, and so broadband and internet availability in my rural district is a huge thing. So we absolutely, and I will look into this in the education budget, ways that we could save money in areas like Anchorage, Mat-Su, Fairbanks that have high-speed internet, but a lot of these areas in my district especially that do not have the high-speed internet, even if some of those schools were still meeting, I mean, a lot of them literally have, Eagle has 10 kids in their school. They're on the verge of shutting the school down. I want equal opportunities as far as education for the rural kids, just because their parents choose to live out in a rural area, that good for them. I personally like living in Indiana because it's not too crowded, but I do want them to have access to good schooling. And so even if some of these rural areas that don't have great internet, if they were still meeting physically, with their teachers, etc., as desired, and a lot of these populated areas with high-speed internet were doing, things that you're talking about, we still would save millions and millions of dollars. So great ideas, and I'll definitely be, thinking of that. Another thing with K through 12, the education budget has been flat funded, at least the time I've been in the legislature. In 2015, it was flat funded, and that means we just did not increase for inflation. But every year it has increased, except for 2015. The BSA has never decreased, the base student allocation. And the whole, budget has never decreased. It flat funded once in 2015. But the news, if you don't increase for inflation, they scream, it's a cut, it's a cut, it's a cut. So just for all of you guys to be aware, the education, a lot of the other departments in the past had been really gutted, but education has never, at least since I've been in there in 2011, has not decreased. It flat funded once. Every other year it's actually slowly bumped up or highly bumped up. So just don't let people tell you that education's been decimated, because that's simply not the truth.
I could give them a $450 million increase to their budget in a blink of an eye for the teachers. Mm-hmm. All it would take is to eliminate the 54, 53 school districts that we have and make them one. So that we take our 503 schools, 504 schools that we have in the state of Alaska, instead of having 53 or 54 school districts running them, we have one school district. That is 54 different departments that get reduced down to one, consolidated. Yes, I understand that's a lot of jobs being lost there, but it's something that needs to be done. We need to consolidate it. That right there could be easily $150 to $200 million savings off of the school budget alone. Yeah. The second thing that needs to be done is healthcare is the biggest cost driver that they have inside
Medicaid
of the
expansion.
Budget.
Yep.
And because of the healthcare and what they are currently paying right now in the school districts, as 54 districts, they need to be taking that and consolidating their power that they have as a school system, 503 schools, and all of these school teachers, all these administrators need to be buying under one package. Mm-hmm. One package, not 54 different packages, not 503 different packages. This school's got to have this Medi-Cal. This school wants this one from this provider. If they were to join them all together, that's what corporations do. Yeah. That's why they're what they pay out for healthcare is so reduced. Yeah. $450 million is what our school system, out of the $1.3 billion, goes into healthcare every single year. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's definitely something, and we've talked in the legislature about consolidating school districts where appropriate, and I personally, that's something I will definitely look into. I don't think that it would be. Reduce it to 3 boroughs. Yeah, if we reduced it to a much smaller number, I think that's something that we can do. But, I mean, our state is just so big, of course, that well, we got 3 boroughs that are run in the state of Alaska. I don't see why we couldn't have 3 school districts. Yeah, yeah. So we definitely could be, working on consolidating to a degree. I definitely agree with that. Another thing, as far as health savings that can be done. So many people, again, and candidates sometimes running that haven't worked in Juneau. I am by no means saying that to be a good representative, you should have had, been a staffer. That's not what I'm saying. But it definitely helps when you know who to trust, who not to trust. I've seen that as a staffer. Dave Tallarico, who I worked for and my current rep, I think he's done a phenomenal job. He was a staffer for a North Pole legislator before he got elected, and he was able to hit the ground running. I am able to hit the ground running in ways that none of my competition really knows, competitors know how to do, all but one, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday. But this is an example as far as the health and social services budget, that just an idea, even though Dunleavy, I think, has done a great job, he can't do everything. He's just the head, but, there's a lot of bureaucracy he's got to deal with and whatever. There were some handicap constituents of my boss's last session that came in and met with us. And, when people are on a disability waiver, which we have in the state, for years because of the wait list, for some supplemental funding, for years, just hoping that their name will be drawn, and they continually get bumped down and down the list because all of a sudden someone else moves into state with a higher disability than them or whatever, but they still have severe disabilities, but they've been on this waiver program for years and they never get drawn. It's really discouraging for them. They have high suicide rates, but there's inefficiencies right in that waiver program that we identified, just meeting with these people, that we could address and could save the state thousands of dollars, if not millions, when you calculate this all out.
And some people will say, oh, well, if we're not saving billions, then it's not worth it. No, every dollar counts, But to give you an example of this, these several different people that we're meeting with, they pointed out that when they have to order, say, adult diapers or adult, or syringes or whatever for their medications and different things, they have to order them on this government-approved business that charges way higher than places like Amazon. If you just order online, Costco, they sell these same products, vital products for these people for a third of the cost easily, and yet, nope, it's not approved, so you have to waste money. And so and I was proud of them for coming up with this.
Throw in wheelchairs and walkers and all that stuff.
Exactly, in the mix.
You can't buy the used stuff, even though when they
might work just fine. Yep.
Yet when you go to the government provider that provides this stuff, lo and behold, it's used stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Retail price that
exactly,
you're leasing to buy, or not leasing to buy, but you lease from them. When your unfortunate time is up, that stuff goes back to the government. The government does a nice little polishing on this stuff and re-puts it back out there, and you pay 50 times what it would have cost to have purchased that same thing outright once and been done and over with it.
So there's efficiencies like that. So I ran with that. I talked to my boss, and we brought in the commissioner and his liaison, and we sat him down and we said, guys, why is this happening? We could be saving a lot of money if, we don't want them buying some random thing from Costco. I absolutely agree, but it's as simple as creating a Costco account for that individual with the waiver. There's only 50 of them at one time in Alaska, or 50 a year, and say, whenever this person calls, if they order any of these approved items, boom, you give it to them, or Amazon. They could come up with these accounts, and they said, "You're right, we could do that."
So in other words, here's your for a really easy example of it. Here's your welfare debit card.
Exactly.
That will only work on specifically approved items.
You can't buy junk food. You can't buy, exactly. Yeah.
And you walk in and you're done and over with.
Yeah.
And save our state
millions
a year.
Exactly.
And billions over the long term.
So there's little things like that just, again, if you haven't been working in these things, people don't even know. And so they're like, I'm going to go cut. Well, there's ways to efficiently cut, and this is one of them. Another one that we came up with there was like 4 people. I went to their dinner, their banquet, and met some of these people, and then they ended up meeting with us. But I was just thrilled that they realized the budget crisis, and they were coming up with efficiencies that our government won't even do. Oh, well, that's hard. Or, we've never done that before. Doesn't mean we can't do it. Another efficiency with these waivers.
So in other words, when we get the song and dance, we've cut to the bone, they're just lying through their teeth. They just don't want to do the legwork to make things happen.
There's a lot of things, just good ideas that haven't been implemented yet. Exactly. So another thing with these waivers, they give out 50 a year, and they have a wait list of about 800 people that have disabilities in the state that are wanting the supplemental, assistance. And they only give out 50 a year. Say someone is very severely handicapped, they get one of the 50 waivers given to them in February, and they pass away in March. We do not currently, and we brought them in and said, why is this? All these people that need this assistance, they don't refill that spot of the person who just took one of the 50 waivers, passed away in March. They do not refill that vacant spot in April or the next month. They wait all the way till next year to then re-give out 50 permits. You see what I'm saying? So, these people that are, some of them are dying because they're on the wait list, needing care, needing this attention and the supplemental, money. They're, and so we brought them in and we said, does this happen sometime? Obviously it happens, but how often? Oh, well, yeah, I guess looking at it a couple times a year. So a couple people, unfortunately, will pass away.
Out of 50, we'll say 5 people pass away. Five
permits that just go to, people that aren't being served by their government that need it the most. And so, there's all sorts of government efficiencies that we really need to be looking at and be doing. When you're cutting the budget in Juneau.
So I'm going to just kind of cut you off here just for a second.
Go for it.
This discussion that we're having right now is more honesty coming about our legislators than I've heard come out of our own legislators in the last 5 years that I've been in politics. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of background about myself. I didn't care about politics through my entire life. I never paid attention to them. I didn't watch them on TV. I didn't give a crap what was going on in our own state until President Trump came down that escalator, and I told myself, this is going to be the most entertaining thing that I've ever watched. This is going to be better than anything Hollywood has ever produced for reality TV. And I started paying attention. And then I started paying attention to our politics here on a local level at the same time. And hence, Politic was born.
Yeah.
And so in all of my years, and we're going pre-Trump candidate, Trump, to current, this is the most honest conversation that I've heard from anybody about our state, even talking to my own legislators that are currently serving in office.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I appreciate the compliment,
and I'm hoping our audience out there is paying attention to this. It was kind of like my conversation that I had with John Nelson yesterday, who's running for Congressman Don Young's seat.
Yeah.
He was a real eye-opening refresher for a lot of my audience out there because they were hearing things from him that they don't hear anywhere else because they're too afraid of what the swamp is going to do to them if they admit this stuff to the public.
Exactly. Well, it's sad, but a lot of legislators, and I know there's a lot of good legislators down there, and so shout out to them. I know who you are, and there are some good ones down there.
That's why my list is only 40 people and not 60.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them that literally they think their constituents are dumb and that they're not paying attention and that they're not going to find out what they're doing.
And that's not and
exactly. Or we can't give them the PFD in the rural areas because they don't know how to spend it. Like just
Jennifer Johnston.
Insults like that to my constituents. That need the PFD more than anything. People are paying attention, and I really do think Tuesday's elections are going to show that. I think the general is going to show that, but people are paying attention, and so as a staffer, I got a degree in political science after I finished my construction management degree. I use both. I do construction 8 months out of the year. I've worked 7 legislative sessions because especially in Fairbanks, the construction season always slows down about January to April. So It's worked out perfect for me to come down and work in Juneau. But I've been paying attention to these details and that I was just talking to you about because as a staffer, I'm like, man, I really feel for these people. It is hard to cut the budget because it's impacting people's life. That does not mean that it doesn't need to be made more efficient and that it can't be cut, because it definitely can. I just gave some examples of that. But it is, it's eye-opening.
And so another cut out there that is greatly ignored because people call it racist. It's you don't care about the indigenous people of Alaska when you say this. And I've got a good chunk of the 3,000 people that follow my page are indigenous people of Alaska.
Exactly.
And I've had one-on-one conversations with these folks left and right, and I have yet to meet one that disagrees with me on this. They don't understand how come people that are on Medicaid and on the expansion, why we are not charging the federal government first for their health care. They don't understand why they're getting a free ride and why Medicaid is being charged what we as Alaskans have to pay for. Why they're not using the federal government's health mandates or the health care that's provided through them to be the first payout.
Yeah.
That alone, $3.6 billion. $3.6 billion. I'm going to repeat that just one more time. $3.6 billion was spent last year on our health care here in Alaska for our Department of Health and Social Services.
Yeah.
This year's current budget, the one going through 2021, is $3.2 billion. The supplemental budget that we were talking about here just a little while ago, that $600 million that they had to add in this past year, over 300 million of that was just in healthcare supplementals alone. Since Walker's expansion, 100 to 300 million dollar supplemental every single year. When we talked about the budget where it's currently at 5.2 billion dollars right now, at the end of the year, that extra 300 million dollars that we're all estimating is a supplemental for healthcare.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time I was working in Juneau and I was totally against this, but Bill Walker, he was, Medicaid expansion, it's going to be great. At the time, yeah, it sounded kind of great because the feds were paying the ratio, I think it was close to 90% paid by the feds. Well, the ratio switched in just, I think it was only a 3 or 4 year period. The ratio was going to switch. That's why back then I said, nope, this is not a good idea. And now we're in the switched ratio where we're paying the 90%.
This is the first year that we're seeing our real drop in what it was. I mean, like you said, it's been 90-10 has been the split. Alaska had to pay 10%. Federal government was paying 90%.
Yeah.
From here on out, and this year we're going to see it. That's the reason why when Schauer was saying a 300 million supplemental this year, that's a very low estimate, considering we're now responsible for 15%.
Yeah.
Not 10% like it has been since they passed. Can't say passed it.
Yeah.
Since the executive order
Pushed
was
it.
signed that saddled us all with it.
Yeah.
And what's really appalling is that our legislators could have vetoed it, and they refused to do it. In 10 years from now, under the current expansion package, our entire GDP, or the what we bring in for tax revenue on a yearly basis, the $4 billion that gets brought in every year, is going to be 100% paying for nothing else but this healthcare and the expansion. If they don't have the money to pay for the current bills as is, 10 years from now, there's going to be nothing there to pay for anything else but healthcare. Screw your dividend. You're not going to see that because they can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to watch the PFD completely disappear.
Yeah.
That includes the corpus, because they're going to have to continuously draw more and more and more than what they currently are right now.
Exactly, yeah.
They can't. It doesn't matter how much taxes they add on to us, whether it be a state income tax, a sales tax, a head tax, the gas tax that is currently stalled out in the House.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing is, I swear, some of these elected officials right now do not understand economics. They don't understand where money comes from. They don't think of it coming from mining and minerals and resources and hard work. They think of it coming from us, from the people. And yet
they think it comes from that tree right behind us.
Yeah. Well, and when Rep. Seaton, one of the fake Republicans, and he was pushing right before, luckily he got replaced by Sarah Vance, who I think is doing a great job. But right before he went out, he was pushing the income tax so hard. And really, the income tax was going to squeeze about $500 million annually out of the people.
Yeah.
Well, that would have severely hurt the people, hurt the economy, and only brought in $500 million when we need more. And yet the
people that it impacted the most is those that are already at the poverty level to begin with.
Yeah, and it would have driven people out of state. And yet the very same legislators that are wanting to tax the people over and over again are anti-new mines, anti-resource development, anti-ANWR, anti-oil, and all these different things that if you don't want to tax the people, money has to come from somewhere, so we need to be developing more mines, to give a shout out to the Pebble Mine. Pebble Mine has become a bad word, it seems like, in Alaska for years because of misinformation. In the past, and so let me give you a brief, synopsis of it. In the past, Pebble Mine was not doing, in my opinion, and a lot of environmentalists' opinion, their due diligence to be environmentally safe.
Right.
They had discovered $500 billion worth of copper assets. That alone would tremendously help our state with jobs, and if we taxed, the Pebble Mine.
Mentioning just the oil reserves out there is only
24 billion. Exactly. So, but the Pebble Mine in the past was not being as environmentally friendly as they should have been. So they started getting all the then of course all the misinformation created all the bumper stickers and no pebble and just people propagating the same misinformation for years.
Before they even started working through the process.
Exactly. So then they got pre-shut down before they even turned in the paperwork, so to speak, under Obama administration. So the current Pebble partnership bought out the old Pebble partnership about 2016, 2017. And they have been jumping through the hoops the right way. They have designed and passed the Army Corps of Engineers. They got their EIS. They're finalizing right now. They got the Army Corps of Engineers to sign off and say, you guys came up with a fail-proof tailings holding, which of course is the main concern of water breaking in an earthquake, whatever, and ruining the fisheries. No one wants to ruin the fisheries.
I'm going to throw it out there. Do you know how much in that particular watershed, how much of the fish that is in the Bristol Bay comes from that watershed?
So I don't know off the top of my head. I know because I've seen the maps.
I'm just going by what's in the EIS report.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I need to look closer at that, but I do know that there are a few smaller streams that are close by that if it were ever to fail, the tailings holding, it could potentially get into the smaller streams. The closest river is 20 miles away. So even if it failed, it would not get into the river where the majority of those salmon runs are spawning, etc. But the thing is, I and none of the current people, I believe, we don't want to do anything that's going to hurt salmon. Salmons are, second or third tied, greatest resource in this state. Well, I carried a bill for Tallarico to get us more natural fish, Well,
I'm going to throw out a couple of numbers for you here, just because it's in there.
Yeah.
There is less than 1% of the fish that is found in the Bristol Bay area comes from the watershed that this is in.
Yeah, I believe that.
Less than 1%.
I believe that.
In the worst ecological damage that you could ever talk for, we're talking NOAA-type floodings happening. The ark is being built. The tailings dam, the biggest, the 64 earthquake is twice that magnitude.
Yep.
The thing gets shattered and shredded. That tailings pond has to travel 10 miles. 10 miles, and you just said 20 miles to the nearest
river.
Big river.
Yeah, yep.
10 miles to get to a contributory stream.
Yep, exactly.
So, and the EIS report states openly in it, we've done the research, we've looked at the drainage that goes through there, the watershed that's there, the amount of fish that are actually coming in and out of these rivers that are in this watershed.
Yeah, exactly.
Less than a 1% chance that if that tailing pond has the worst ecological damage that you ever could think of, to ever be able to reach the closest contributaries in that watershed to begin with. It has to travel 10 whole miles.
And so money has to come from somewhere. And when people, oh my gosh, don't you touch the budget, but give us a full PFD, and don't raise taxes on anyone. I am fully committed to not raising taxes on you, the people. The people should not be punished for the bad legislative spending for decades. 20 years, decades.
Yeah.
But money has to come from somewhere. So why not develop, like our Constitution mandates us to responsibly develop our resources? Why not, incentivize and help more mines responsibly come to fruition? More oil and gas, development, more agriculture. We only produce about 5% of our food source in Alaska. If we really got cut off from our food supply and boats and stuff, we're totally screwed, and then there goes all the animals because everyone's going to be hungry and trying to, so, and that's something in Inanna, we finally, after a 30-year battle, got a bridge completed that gets us out across the Inanna and opens up to 15 miles of road on the west side of Inanna, heading out towards the Nome direction. That area is over 160,000 acres of state ag land, some of the best state ag land in the state, according to the soils, and longest amount of growing period days, etc. Things like that. We need to be investing in diversification, wind turbines. I mean, there's wind, solar, all these different things. But in the meantime, things like the Pebble Mine that are only about, if things continue to go well, only about 5 years off now, that can produce billions of dollars, not to mention of state revenue in the long run, not to mention all the jobs it's going to create. They were so generous, they've decided. So we in Juneau have had briefings over and over again recently with the new Pebble partnership,
Right.
the facts, and then we've had all the emotional pleas come in, and they are mostly emotional, mostly factless, the other side. And they are being so above and beyond that they're willing to pay dividends to the local tribes and organizations, which is good, but not necessary. But they're going above and beyond just to kind of change the narrative. I swear if they changed the name, it'd probably go right through.
To build a power plant for them to get away from their diesel generators and everything else that they have operating inside of their
non-eco-friendly things. Yep.
Yeah. And here's a power plant that we're going to sustain you with that'll be good for the next 50 to 100 years.
Yeah.
Get you away and out of that diesel.
So we have tremendous potential still. You know, we have the.
I'll just throw it out there. How many spills have happened because of their diesel?
Yeah.
That they don't talk about because they're not, their name isn't Pebble.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a lot of potential in the state that I'm going to be working hard for. I met with Meade Treadwell, former lieutenant governor, about a month and some ago. He came through Nenana, saw my signs, gave me a call. We made an impromptu meeting because he's in charge of negotiations with Canada to connect our railway to Alberta. That's huge for our state.
That's 100% paid for too, without one dime of Alaskan money.
Well, not so. He's still negotiating the portion Alaska is supposed to pay, because Canada is willing to pay. You know, their half. It's 1,500 miles. We total. The Alaska side's only 250 miles, but the extension into Alaska benefits us more than it does Canada. So they are still, Meade is in the process of negotiating the right-of-ways are all taken care of already.
They even started clearing all of it.
On Canada's side, they're already surveying, which is tremendous news for Alaska. That'll bring the cost of goods so much down, you know, and so much more affordable. But yeah, that's something that, you know, goes right through Tok, right through my district. It's going to bring a lot of jobs to build it. And then after the fact, it'll bring the cost down. You know, we have all this good potential on the horizon, and yet we're constantly having to fight for the people's PFD. It's sucking all the air out of the room because people don't want to just leave the formula to do its job, you know. If anything, if it has to change at all, I don't think it's right, and I've been telling this on the campaign trail, I don't think it's right for me or any other legislator to change the PFD formula because it's the people's money. I will push, if it gets to this point, I will push that it goes before the people in a statewide ballot, and everyone gets to see the facts, and they vote on if it has to change at all, because it's their money. Why shouldn't they have a say and a vote in in their money?
And we've said enough here just in our conversation today to prove outright there's cuts available. They can reduce that budget $1.5 billion very, very easily. And I say easily, it sounds easy, but when you've got...
It'll be hard, but they can.
When you got the special interest saying out there, you can't cut 1 penny of our budget, which is where Recall Dunleavy comes into play.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at who runs them. It's Alaska AFL-CIO, Siri Corporation, NEA Alaska. Those are the names who are financially funding the recall.
Yep.
That says that just because you want to cut our budget,
we're going to recall you.
We're going to recall you. Yes.
He did exactly what he campaigned on doing. He's cutting the budget. You know
exactly what he campaigned on. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, so I mean, I do believe that we do need to bring in more revenue as well as making cuts. But before we bring in any new revenue, and again, I will oppose any new revenue coming in from taxing the people. But before we bring in any new revenue, we owe it to the people to cut our budget first. One thing I want to tell you and my listeners about, I don't like hypocrisy in government. It's all over in government. But one of the things that I'm willing to do, and I have never liked this fact, most people don't know, the 90-day session alone, let alone when they push it to 120 and so on, 90-day session alone, legislators are making about $33,000 in per diem. That's on top of their base salary. So
here's your 50 grand, and here's another.
Here's your 50 grand. Here's your 30 grand just for the 90 days. You know, that is something that I'm going to lead by example with a bill right after right after I get sworn in, And again, I've carried lots of bills. I know how to do it, and I know that you can do it because there was a bill to reduce ours that they fake pushed and then killed it quietly in 2017. But I am going to do a bill that it's not right for me to expect other state employees to have to take a cut, which we all are in this together. We all need to kind of take a cut. If I'm not willing to cut my own salary. And so I'm going to do a bill to cut per diem in half for the legislators. It's not going to be very common or, a great idea amongst the legislators, although my constituents have been thrilled hearing this. And some legislators may say, oh, that can't be done. Well, I know it can be done because I've been a staffer and I've paid double rent every time I've gone down there. And this last session was the first time ever that the staffers got a $30 a day stipend for housing, which really helped, but the legislators get a $330 a day federal rate stipend, and we can change that. So I am going to cut that in half, and they'll do just fine. And again, I know because as a staffer, I've done just fine. It's
the one that I would really love to see is for them to move it onto the road system legislature.
Exactly. I would love to move. Yep.
Our special session in 2019 really opened up my eyes to how much is being stolen just in per diem per year.
Yep.
When every single legislator that came to Wasilla did not take per diem the entire time they were here. That was almost 15 days of no per diem going out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Watching instead of here, and they had the lowest amounts. We'll just throw oddball numbers out there. We'll say if you were sat in Juneau, you got $50,000 during that period of time that you were in there for all the legislators.
Mm-hmm.
By them not being there and him in Wasilla not taking any per diem because now they were within driving distance of their sessions.
Most of them, yep.
They couldn't take their per diems. They're within their home distance of their houses and everything else. That cut the budget by $20,000 that month. $20,000 because those 22 legislators that didn't go to Juneau didn't collect one penny of per diem.
And again, $20,000 might not seem like a lot with a multi-billion-dollar budgets, but every dollar counts. And $20,000, I'd much prefer to give to
$20,000 over 5 months.
Exactly, $20,000 over 5 months is a big number. But I would rather spend that $20,000 on, like we were talking about, these handicapped people that are, that are literally some of them dying before they even get this subsidized waiver, things like that. I'll take a pay cut long before I have to do things like that. So that's something that I do plan on doing right off the bat. And I invite any other candidates watching, please, when I come up with this, join me on it because really we owe it to the people. I don't think legislators or government should be above the law. I really hate when people make up laws and they say, all of you have to do this, but we're exempt. Like, that is something also I'm against, If it's good enough for you, it should be good enough for me too, But
we can ignore the law that says that where the governor stipulates you're supposed to be for a special session. Oh no, we're going to be in Juneau because we just don't agree with the law. So we're just going to ignore it as if it doesn't
We're going to ignore
exist.
it, not vote on it. All they had to do was actually vote on it, but they knew they didn't have the votes. So they just ignored the law and went and met in Juneau. Because they knew they didn't have the votes.
Their illegal bill of HB 2002 and 2001, which for the first time used tax money to pay our PFD.
Yeah.
And they did this while they were in Juneau and completely ignored the 22 that were sitting here while they were crafting that bill.
Yeah.
Illegally passing legislation in an illegal session that wasn't even gavelled in correctly.
Exactly. So I really urge all of you watching to please hold these legislators accountable on Tuesday. Those of us, like myself, petition candidate going straight to the general, hold the people in the general election accountable by voting for people that are not in the current majority in both House and Senate, because they're talking over here and saying, that they're cutting and they're increasing the operating budget. And that's just
service.
Yeah, and that's just, it's not right. Another thing about this last session, there was the Senate majority literally said with their press releases, help is on the way, And what did they do? They did not give one penny to the people. This really frustrated me, and that's why I looked into it deeply. They gave $75 million in COVID relief money to the hospitals, which was vital and necessary. And they gave some to Military and Veterans Affairs, about $10 million. And then they they changed the wording to where if you lost your job because of COVID, you could get on unemployment. But they did not put one penny into employment. That's pulled out of our paychecks every month, and so that money was already there. And even though some federal dollars went into that account for Alaska unemployment, our state legislators did not give the people one penny when they needed it the most. And that is just blatant disrespect for the people, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was sharing that one, the video of them when they were discussing that over and over and over again. I do a lot of live streaming of their gavel.
Yeah.
Just because I know people that are at work and stuff don't have time to sit and watch it. Mm-hmm. Or to be sitting in front of their TV as being one of the only platforms that you can actually view it on live, or going to their app-only ability to watch their live stream that you can't download because they split the video and the audio separate from each other, so you can't download their videos later to watch on your own. They're little things that I've learned over the years that they just won't do, making it impossible for you to be a well-informed constituent or a voter out there and know what's going on. And it's just disgusting what they were discussing about the COVID CARES Act money when they were talking about that, and like you're bringing up about the money, while other states were increasing their own personal unemployment, we were at the bottom percentage out of 50 states for what we give out on a normal basis.
Exactly. And several legislators in the majority stood up and said, we don't need to send any people stimulus money or the rest of their PFD. The feds are taking care of us. The feds are 23 trillion in debt, and now about 26 trillion in debt, which is fake money, And
$26.5 trillion.
Whereas the earnings reserve account had your money, the people's money sitting in it that could. I'm a conservative. I'm not about government giving people money unless it's their money, which is what the PFD is. And so for them to stand up and say
$7,700 could do for all the people that are losing their businesses, their homes, their rentals, their cars.
So many of my districts
that are going, Mom, Dad, why are you guys always so stressed? Why are you?
Yeah.
What the parents that keep that stuff bottled up. I'm one of those parents. I don't talk about my
don't want to stress the kids.
My kid. Yes. And
it's terrible. I've been, again, campaigning all over. My district has Denali Park. We have Toke, where all the RVs used to come in. That's not happening. They are hurting in the tourism sector so much. Businesses never opened this summer because they couldn't. You drive through the park still. Just the other day, coming down here, it's at not even half capacity. It's like at a quarter capacity compared to normal. They still have the street lights, driving through the park are still covered up because why bother? There's not enough traffic. That is detrimental, what COVID has done to our economy. And so we need to be looking out for the health and safety of our people, but at the same time, mental health, losing your jobs, all this needs to be brought in the picture. And the economics of our state needed to be better thought out before all this happened.
I'm personally one of those that is paying the repercussions of it. I've lost 40% of the business, a little over 40% of the business that I would normally be doing at this time of the year.
Yep.
Normally from the beginning of May until right around September, October, I am just gun-ho. Last year, if I wanted to do candidate interviews like I'm doing right now, I would never have been able to do it because I'm too damn busy to get out there and to do these kind of interviews. My normal work would have been it would have been occupying all of my extra time that I'm spending doing these.
Exactly.
And this year, I'm trying to figure out. I'm surviving my summer. But winter's just around the corner, and my normal nest egg that I normally build up during this period of time that carries me through my slow months during the winter, I don't have it this year.
Yeah,
I'm not eligible for any of the PPE reimbursements that they give out there.
Yep.
I'm considered the gig environment because of the type of the work I do, and they only just made that available at the beginning of July. For those that are in the gig department. But because of the way I operate my business, I do not qualify for even that stipend of what they call unemployment for gig people.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm sitting here going, okay, do I make it through this next year? I really don't know. And then to see yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Channel 2 come out and say 11,000 jobs will not be coming back by the end of this year.
Yeah,
that's just Anchorage.
That's just Anchorage. That was horrible news, detrimental. And, you know, it's easy to say in hindsight, we should have done this, and we shouldn't have done this. But really, this is hurting our economy, hurting people's lives. How drastic an overkill we went with COVID. There's no other word for it, in my opinion. Is overkill.
And to have a mayor that's
doing what your mayor is doing. Not your mayor, but Anchorage's mayor is doing.
What makes it even worse is you look at the what they did do, and what they say. The mayor on his press briefing yesterday comes out and says, look at all the money that we used from the COVID and where it's going. We put $20 million aside for the hospitality, but actually that $20 million is now only going to be $14 million. And here's what we did for small businesses. We gave them $7 million on top of that so that they could go and get these loans that they get. And by the way, ignore G Street downtown, the only place of downtown that's surviving. Just because I'm a partner in their businesses doesn't mean that I did them any special favors by closing off the street and getting all these outdoor facilities built.
Yeah.
To the rest of us Alaskans that are going, oh my God, what the hell do we do?
How are we going to survive through the winter, especially in District 6?
And have the IG come out and say, you guys spent the last 2 months building this plan to spend this $156 million. By the way, 90% of what you have inside of your plan of spending that $156 million is illegal.
Yeah.
And you can't do it.
Yep.
Because you're using it to fund a budget that's your city's budget. You're using it to do social programs that has nothing to do with COVID.
Yep. It's you know, I've been telling people, look out for candidates that are all about controlling you and micromanaging you. That is not the role of government. You know, the Constitution say, Congress shall make no law prohibiting, shall not. It's not, you shall do this, you shall, So look out for candidates that are, I'm running because, I want to force people to do, we're not being, look out for things like that.
Or you get media that come, and I'm going to throw media out there, and this is left-wing trolls too, that are saying, look at these COVID candidates that showed up at the Kreiner's Diner, COVID Kreiner's Diner, because that's the new nickname they want to give that place, because they went there to show support for a business that is losing everything that they have built, worked their entire lives for.
Which was just tragic. Yeah.
And now I'm going, now wait a minute. You stomped all over our First Amendment. You have taken away every right that we have. You won't even let us into an assembly meeting, which we are legally, by their own bylaws, state that we are supposed to be allowed to be present during these testimonies and everything else while they're spending this money. And the people that are standing up for our constitutional rights are the ones that are bad.
Yeah, it's so reversed and switched, and that's one thing that I will not do as a legislator, is I will not trample on our amendments, especially the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom to believe or not believe in religion and assemble and go to church. Saying that churches could not gather was a constitutional violation, plain and simple. And so I would have voted and gone and met with the governor and said, I know how much pressure you're under, because he was under a lot from the left, but let's not trample on our freedoms and our that's unconstitutional. And so that's something that, if elected, we can promote, and we can do everything we can to have social distancing and safe. I mean, I've done all my barbecues, meet and greets outside with 6 feet of distancing for those who are sensitive, because I don't want, of course, we want to keep people safe, and especially the aging population, and I want them to come to my rallies. I had a whole bunch of elderly population show up to my Salsha rally. I stood far away from them because they wanted that, but yet they wanted to be there. Right. People can make their own decisions. You teach them correct principles. You let them govern themselves. And when we start micromanaging from the top down, and trampling on our rights, that's something that I'm not about and will not do as a legislator. So.
Well, I'm going to throw just a few more. I'm not sure how we're doing on time here.
Yeah.
I know that we
close to wrapping up, it looks like, but yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Go for it, yeah.
You have a limited time available on your hands, which I really do appreciate.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this.
Gun rights, as a staunch conservative, we know we're pretty much where we stand on the Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we've got legislators out there that are throwing out red flag laws like HB 62.
62, yep.
And
exactly.
So where do you stand in our Second Amendment? And I mean, you pretty much spelled it out, but I want to make sure the people watching know where you stand too.
Absolutely. I've always been very pro Second Amendment. Guns are a tool, and that's it. Guns in and of themselves do not kill people. You set a gun right here, you leave it for 102,000 years, it's never going to kill someone just sitting there. So the right to bear arms shall not be infringed under my watch. House Bill 62, I was again working this past legislative session in Juneau. I screened that law, and that bill. And I recommended to my boss, this is not what we want. She, of course, did not like it either and didn't support it. We, if anything, need to enforce the current gun laws that we already have, background checks, etc. We don't need more, and so we don't want guns to get in the hands of criminals. But, we do not need these red flag laws. I'm adamantly against any new gun restricting laws because what we have, I think, is sufficient.
Okay. It's always the simple, short, sweet ones there.
Yeah.
Right to life, abortions. Where do you stand there?
So great question. This last session we had the heartbeat bill that got so close to getting enough co-sponsors that we would have been able to, with 21 co-sponsors, you could bring it right up on the floor. You could.
Well, I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here. We've had 21 states pass the heartbeat bill.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 21 states that have had the Supreme Court come back and say you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's done. It's over with. We don't care how hard you work. Why support a bill that you already know will never have any teeth?
Well, good question. It has been shut down in a lot of states. We don't know yet if it will be shut down up here. It very likely could, like you said.
Well,
but we're not
we've got
sure.
Judges that have already declared that the $335,000 had to be put back in, even though our legislators all voted and our governor said, no, we're pulling this money.
Yeah, that's true. So that's something, though, you win by degrees in Juneau. I've definitely learned that. A lot of people think it's my way or the highway. And that does not work down there. I've seen people come in, and they're zero effective when it's my way or the highway. You have to win by degrees. I'm very pro-life. My only exceptions are for health of the mother, and even then, professionals are not even calling that abortion anymore. That is at that point where it's jeopardizing the mother's health. They'll preterm try to deliver the baby safely and save the baby, and if it dies or does not make it, that is not an abortion. They did everything they could to save the life of the mother. At that point, and they do everything they can to save the life of both, but the mother's life is the priority in that instance. But that's not an abortion. That is, all right, let's pre-deliver this baby early to try to save the baby and, of course, save the mother. And so that is an exemption that I have on my official stance on abortion. And the only other thing is...
see, that's an exemption that if I was a legislator and I had to vote, I would vote to pass that.
Yeah.
Because you said the one thing that made me agree with you on it is that baby's life is... If I had a choice between the baby or the mother living, I am going to do my utmost to make sure both of them live.
Exactly.
But the mother's life is more important, because without that mother, that baby is not going to have a chance to begin with.
And exactly, yeah. So the only other exception, and both of these are so, the percentage is so small, and yet, the other side will say, they'll act like this is, you don't support, this is every single one of them. No, most are elective abortions. And I am adamantly against elective abortions because it's a states' rights issue for me. we know the reason why abortion's even a thing, right, is because for whatever reason, someone ends up pregnant, they don't want the responsibility of that human life. They know, science has shown forever that once conceived, it will turn into a human unless it naturally miscarries or we kill it. It will become a human, and therefore life begins at conception, and it at that point is protected, in my opinion, under the Declaration of Independence.
Well, see,
life,
now,
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Now, see, there's a bill that I would support versus the heartbeat bill.
Yeah.
Is life at conception, because you just pointed out one of the reasons why I stand behind it. I am personally, I want to say that I am a right to life person that I will stand staunchly behind, but there are very rare, very minute few exceptions that I have that I consider abortions acceptable.
Yeah, and so on my official website, which by the way is verhagenforhouse.com, run together for house, FOR, but I have this spelled out on here is the life of the mother that I just talked about, and rape and incest. But even rape and incest, I put in there that I would feel comfortable using whatever state funds necessary to help after, a victim is raped or, and becomes pregnant, to help provide counseling and do everything we can to keep the baby and help that woman choose to keep the baby, not push abortion on that woman, but keep the baby even if it came from a rape. But ultimately, it would be her decision, is my stance on rape. But why commit a second horrible tragedy because a first horrible tragedy of a rape, happened, right? Rape is a horrible tragedy. Why commit a second horrible tragedy?
Where I stand at is I agree with what you just said there when it comes to like a rape victim. I would love to do everything I can to possibly make sure that both lives are well taken care of.
Yep.
But ultimately in that one, that's a horrific thing that happened, and I can understand why someone would not want to bring that child into a world.
Exactly.
And so to me, that's heart-wrenching to say that, because I think life is so precious, but
exactly,
there is the exception. But where I draw the line at is you got somebody that gets pregnant at 6 months along, says, oh, I no longer want to have this kid, I'm going in and going to go ahead and have an abortion.
Yeah.
State of Alaska allows it all the way up to 9 months.
Which is just atrocious. It's horrible. It's inhumane. And like I just said, the reason why abortion's even a thing is because everyone knows, and science proves, that once conceived, it will turn into a human. And so that is life under our laws that should be protected, and so that's where I stand.
I think it's hilarious though is that they say we found water on Mars, there's life there, but life at conception means nothing. No, that's not a life.
Yeah, the hypocrisy is unreal. Yeah.
All right, I've got a curveball for you here, one that was brought to my attention, I know those that are watching out there, and I would say there's probably about 500 of the people out there that knew that I was going to have this interview before it actually happened. There's been some things through the rumor mill that has come up about the differences between a borough and an unorganized borough. Mm-hmm. And I guess there was some statements that have been made that people believe that you are wanting to support organizing into one giant borough and no longer have the unorganized boroughs out there, to where that they'll be forced to pay taxes, those kind of things, where an unorganized borough doesn't have those.
Yeah. I don't know where that rumor is coming from. So, I live in Enana, which is in an unorganized area. We have a city government and city limits. Again, my brother's the mayor of that. He is not looking, and I am not looking to push a borough on anyone who doesn't want a borough. I don't want a borough right now. I live in Enana because I don't want to pay the high, ridiculous Fairbanks North Star Borough property taxes. Same with Anchorage. The punishing people again for having property is a crime, and so there's I don't know where this came from, but I will nip it right now, because
that's the reason why I'm
exactly.
asking you it. So.
I am definitely and as a state representative again, I would not be pushing a borough. I've met with people in Copper Valley a lot. I know they're in an unorganized area. They don't want a borough. good for them. I live in Nenana. I don't want a borough. I'm right in between Denali Borough and Fairbanks, and we've been in there for a long time. The only reason in Nenana even that we had a discussion and a feasibility study about a borough years ago was because with Doyon drilling for oil and gas across on the west side of the Nenana River, Fairbanks and Denali were looking at annexing Nenana. Well, boom, Fairbanks of 100,000 people in their borough annexed Nenana of just under 1,000. There goes local control, you know. So that would be the only reason I would want a borough right now in Nenana is if we were going to get annexed. And that threat's gone now.
And you would never have any representation for the taxes you pay. You'd never see a penny back.
Yeah.
Girdwood is a good example of that. I mean, they are a part of the Anchorage borough. But what do they receive for their being there? They pay taxes and they get nothing to show for it in the end.
And they probably don't even have a seat on your assembly, I'm sure.
That wouldn't surprise me one bit. Eagle River's another good example. I mean, they're a part of the Anchorage borough, but when it comes to where their taxes go, it's not being redistributed back into Eagle River. It's all being spent on the programs that Anchorage wants to have inside of Anchorage.
Yeah. So some of my supporters and friends out in the Copper Valley, they've, I've said, go ahead and please do, and they've slapped no borough stickers on my signs because, they've talked to me about this and they know that that's not something that I would ever push, especially from the state down. If people were ever going to organize in those areas and if they chose to, they should do it. Local control is always best. They can get together, they can have a vote. If they were to do that, that's up to them. I currently, if there was a vote in Nenana, unless it was us getting annexed by Fairbanks, I'd vote no on having a borough right now. So hopefully that's clear enough.
I think it is. I think it is. I just wanted to bring it up just because haven't asked you yet. Always curious to know if you are running for a cabinet seat sitting for the governor, you're required to disclose any federal crimes that you have made committed in the last 10 years. You're required to disclose any misdemeanor crimes within the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. We had a legislator, or not a legislator, but a candidate that was going in for an appointment, John Francis. They called him the ghost hunter. Mm-hmm. Media portrayed him as the ghost hunter, and this is why he did, because he was looking for ghosts. Mm-hmm. This is why he didn't get voted in. Nobody wanted to take him as a serious representative there. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't why he was rejected. He had committed a crime 37 years ago, and this is why they rejected him. And this crime that he committed, he had never committed another crime since. Mm-hmm. But they used that as leverage to say, hey, you're not allowed. Yeah. Myself, I've asked this question of several legislators out there and the candidates that are running. And because of their lack of candor and lack of disclosure, I don't hesitate to go and do a criminal background check afterwards. Yeah. And go and see, is there anything out there dirt-worthy to make sure it gets brought out into the light. Yeah. You as a candidate, you're not required to disclose this stuff. But that does not mean your competitor
won't try
to do it. Yeah. So this is your opportunity now. If there's anything out there that you would like to disclose, to go ahead and let it out. And then I'm going to add one more onto it. We live in the Me Too world. Mm-hmm. And Brett Kavanaugh is a good example of it for a more national level for people to understand out there. Mm-hmm. But we've had it affect us here locally. Mm-hmm. We've had Rep. Dean Lestlakes is a good example. Yeah. He was the premier choice for Walker to administration. Mm-hmm. They spent a year in the House Ethics Committee burying his Me Too moment, making sure nobody knew about it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, if I was to speculate a guess, it was for leverage to get him to vote the way they wanted him to vote.
Probably, yeah.
It took the media to bring this out into the environment. Then we got Rep. Zach Franzler, who rough sex, beat up a lady, cracked her cheekbone. Spent a month before that, and it was presented to the Ethics Committee almost immediately after it had happened. It took the victim going to the press about a month later to get this all out into the open to the public because, again, the House Ethics Committee was doing their best to keep this stuff buried. Yeah. Yeah, so,
I know. So I think I know where the question's going, and the answer is, I have not seriously thought about running for any office until maybe 5 years ago, when I started seeing all this stuff in Juneau and being so frustrated with it, So that's maybe the first time I've started thinking about, okay, maybe I'll run for office. So I have not been purposely living my life squeaky clean to run for office. That's not the intentions. I have chose to do my best living, my life a good Christian life. My faith, and government is not about pushing your faith on others. But at the same time, I do believe faith belongs in our conversations, and so my faith has taught me to as a follower of Jesus Christ, to treat others kindly, treat everyone equally, and things like that. Not to lust after, a woman who's not my spouse, things like that. So I've grown up doing my best to faithfully live my religion, which teaches against, any immorality like we're talking about, especially rapes or, rough sex. Even pornography is not something that our church ever condones and teaches against it. And so I've grown up doing my absolute best to avoid all of that stuff. Okay. And so, yeah, by all means, go ahead and dig. There's nothing that I have to hide. And, I'll admit, I guess I've gotten, I think, one speeding ticket in my life. That was years ago. I think we all have those. But besides that, yeah, no misdemeanors, no any criminal records. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, that's...
And I want to keep it that way. Yeah. But it's never right. All sorts of cover-ups happen with, elected officials and stuff. And whenever we see it, it's all of our duty to quickly call it out and bring it to light for the sake of everyone, and not just, our wives, daughters, mothers, but, boys and men as well, that become victims if this stuff is not brought to light. What Westlake did, was appalling. I knew him. I worked down in Juneau. I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. I was shocked and saddened by that. Same with Zach Fansler.
The part that disgusted me is here we've got Bryce Edgman, Chris Tuck,
taking forever to do anything about
Ivy Spinonsaltz, and I'm going to throw Gabriella Dukes under the bus here too, because she had involvement not directly with Westlake's, but with another legislator that was down there for false allegations.
Yeah.
They buried it. They kept it hidden. They used it in like you're describing. If you know about it and something happened, it needs to be brought out immediately, not kept hidden and hope that the public doesn't find out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that it's never right. It needs to be brought out right at the beginning. But we, I come from a big family. I have 5 sisters. I'm married, to the love of my life. I don't have any girls yet. I want a big family, and we want a big family. We'll see. But human decency. It's never right to sexually harass anyone. And so that's something that I always will stand against. I was a big part of the Choose Respect campaign. The violence and sexual assault crimes in my district, in the rural areas especially, is horrendously high.
What it is in other areas.
And that's something that we can never stand for. And so, great question. Please grill all of the candidates on this.
I ask every single one of them.
Because the truth always comes to light. So if there's anything to hide, it will come out.
And there's only been a very small handful of people that I have not asked this, and we're talking about because they have a stellar military career that would have never allowed that to have come to the surface to begin with.
Yeah.
Proposition number 2, ranked choice voting, jungle primaries. Pick your candidate, number from 1 to 10, and everybody gets a gold star for participating. I did a mock election using Governor Dunleavy's race in the general election as the example. We got Governor Dunleavy, Tolan, Begich, and whoever else was in that race, Walker, yeah. So we've got that race there. Same dynamics were in play. I used 100 people as my voting base.
Mm-hmm.
Governor Dunleavy ended up ultimately losing it because he had only 49% of the vote. Begich ended up getting 51% of the vote. 25% of the voters were what I would classify as the uneducated voters that voted, because 13 or 12% of them voted for Walker and Mallett, knowing full well that he was no longer even in the race because of Brian Mallett's Me Too moment that caused him to resign overnight.
Yeah.
So here we got Prop 2. Better Elections is called, oh, this is a way to have more fair and free elections if we do ranked choice voting. What's your feelings?
Yeah. So I think that Prop 2 is just a convoluted mess that we don't need to introduce into our, voting situation. I do believe, more than anything, my ideal for voting would be, it might take a while, but would be that everyone comes in with some sort of picture ID, casts a physical ballot, and moves on. Like, that's one ballot. I don't want this ranked choice. Oh, well, I like this person, they're second favorite. That's just convoluted. I feel like our elections in Alaska, at least, all the way until Gabrielle Ledoux brought it to a whole new level, have been pretty fair, pretty accurate. People pushing the statewide all-mail elections, like, that's just a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. This is a recipe for disaster. I think what is so complicated about 2 or 5 people on a ballot and you circle one, So that's something that I'm definitely going to be voting against. I think it's not necessary.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, honestly.
Yeah. Yep.
How much time do we got left? Do you know?
I gotta go just because my babysitter's timed out. So.
Okay, that's what I wasn't too sure. So I knew we were. But to be honest with you, we've nailed just about everything that I have on my list here.
I think so. Yeah, we've kind of talked about it. We've talked about my total opposition to Prop 1. I think we've covered most of the topics for sure.
Yeah, especially the main key ones that are going to be going to Juneau with. So I'm going to end this with my last couple of questions that I always ask everybody, and they're short and sweet.
Okay.
If voted in, what would be your priorities to accomplish, and what bills would you push to pass?
Okay, good question. So my priorities is I would love to balance our budget. I don't know how long. I believe in term limits. That's a big thing, but I believe in term limits. I don't know how long, if elected, I would stay working in our legislature. I definitely would not be making it my career, the rest of my career. I'm not about that. I'm for term limits, and I'll push that as well. But I would love to see a balanced budget eventually, and that's going to take years. Can't do it overnight, but I would love to balance our budget. I would love to diversify our economy. And I've mentioned a little bit about ag, pushing for more renewable resources, things like solar. I don't know if you've seen, but in Willow there's a big solar 1 megawatt farm that they put there right off the side of the highway.
Right off to the right.
Those people, that same company has been working for over a year with my brother Josh Verhagen, again the current mayor of Nenana. They are finalizing a deal to put one 10 times bigger in Nenana, right? Really, like maybe 2 miles from where I live. That, things like that. Then they're going to be able to generate power, dump it right into GVA, into the grid. Things like that overall will bring down our costs. It'll reduce, fossil fuels. I'm not one of those that I do recognize and acknowledge that our climate is changing. I believe it's always been changing. I do believe that we should not be polluting with carbon emissions, to the severity we are. But I personally do not think the term global warming and humans, us in Alaska, this massive state, I do not believe that we are the ones. We are polluting for sure, and that should, clean energy will help clean that up. But I do not believe that we are changing the climate. I think it's always been changing.
Well, we got the Arctic Reserve out there, which is the permafrost area and everything else is putting out more carbon pollution on a daily basis than 17 of the most industrial places in the United States and in the world combined. Yeah. And the trees that are out there can't even scrub half of what that is being produced just in that area. And to say what my vehicle is the main cause of it, or the forest fires that we had going on last year, put out more carbon pollution than Alaska's population combined has done over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it's we need to adapt with climate change, but we're not going to stop it. It's not stoppable. But yeah, but I'm a proponent of green energy projects. I think that's awesome. Wind power, there's wind turbine fields right in Healy. They alone, when they're at full capacity, they power 20% of Fairbanks. Like, that's awesome. We've come huge strides, with clean coal and clean energy, and so I'm going to do my best to help with those things. But yeah, I would like to diversify our economy to where we have more mining, to where we have more ag, where we have more movie productions in Alaska, more tourism. People love the fake, sometimes, reality TV shows about Alaska, but they're entertaining. We get a lot of business, a lot of movie productions up here, things like that. Everything, again, helps, and it's going to take a long time to compete with oil, as far as bringing in revenue. But we need to start somewhere, and so diversification of revenue is something that I plan to continually push, as well as I really do want, especially in our rural areas, to do my best to bring awareness to sexual assault and the suicide rates and help reduce that. Whether it be, the statewide initiatives like Choose Respect. This last legislative session I was working on for my boss, getting a 3-digit hotline that victims could call instead of 911, because many of them are scared. They don't really want to call the cops right away, but they do want to talk about their boyfriends that are beating them or whatever, And so a hotline with resources that could help, decrease a local one, because there's a national one right now, but we need a local one. It's something that's easy to remember. We have a phone number too in Anchorage, but it's hard, especially in a panic moment, to ever remember anything except for a 3-digit hotline. So, things like that. That's another focus of mine that I want to be working towards, is helping bring down Alaska's high rate of suicide and sexual assault. Yeah. Exactly. So those are some of the priorities that I'll be working for.
I love them. And now my final question for the day: does Alaska have a spending problem or a revenue problem?
Definitely a spending problem. We really need to look really closely. We've talked about this a lot, but we need to get into the nitty-gritty. We need to stop just glazing over and saying, "Oh, we can't cut." We need to be innovative. We need to think of ways to provide quality education and better education than our kids are getting right now. I have some ideas about that. I have, a nephew I was talking about in high school recently about his special needs and what would help him, achieve more, better grades. And I believe better outcome. Most teachers want that same thing, and so but the solution is not always money, especially when we don't have money. So
the solution is not cutting the teachers, but maybe the people that are behind the teachers that do nothing but push a pencil all day.
So yes, to answer your question, we definitely have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So.
All right. Well, thank you, people out there on Facebook. Do not forget to like and share this video. Make sure your friends get to hear it. This has been one episode of Meet the Candidate that is definitely worth resharing. We covered so many different topics today that most people out there have not heard in any other interview that I've had already, and it makes it well worth shareable, because the topics discussed are those that are going to be facing every single legislator when they go down to Juneau. This is Elijah Verhagen. He is running for House District number 6 out of the Fairbanks District area of Nenana. It is huge, the size of what you said.
Indiana.
Yep. Size of Indiana is just an outrageously large area, the biggest area that for interview candidates that I've had so far. I really do appreciate your time here. It has been an absolute wonderful to be able to sit here and talk.
And I really appreciate you having me. Best way to follow my campaign, go to verhagenforhouse.com, all run together. There you can subscribe to my campaign, follow it. Of course, Facebook is Elijah Verhagen for State House, and is
that a 4 or FOR?
Both of them are FOR.
Okay.
And then also just at. For Twitter, it's at Elijah Verhagen for my Twitter. But yes, my contact info is on there. Please reach out to me if you're in District 6. I would love to answer your questions, and I would love to have your support going into the general election. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And for everybody that's still tuning in right now, doing this, being able to do interviews and everything else, exposing what mainstream media doesn't want you to know, exposing what our legislators don't want you to know. it has turned into a full-time job. I mean, I'm working my butt off on a daily basis. It may not seem like it, but my 12-hour days that I have between working my normal job and trying to do this, it's turned into 18-hour days, and I do it 7 days a week. I need your help. Go to my website, politidic.com. That's POLITADICK.com. Click that donate button. Any amount that you contribute goes straight back into making sure that I'm expanding my content, giving me the gas money to drive in from the valley to come do this interview here in Anchorage. Without your support, it's going to become impossible to keep up trying to do this, especially in our environment that we're in right now. I've lost 40% of the work I'd normally be doing right now in my regular work. I need your help. So again, go to politidic.com. That's POLITADICK.com. Click that donate button. Anything from $5 on up. Pick whatever works for you. Help me out. Let's give the mainstream media a run for their money. They really do hate it that I sit there and show you guys everything unfiltered. They don't want you to know. Again, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to share. Facebook squeals on you if you don't share.
Thank you.